Hey everybody, it's Argent, and this is the preface to the movie Bob Brick by Brick, aka Movie Bob's suicide note / call for help from his personal Vietnam. So before you listen to / watch me torture myself for the rest of this, I just wanted to do a preface where we look at what Movie Bob says this book is going to be, and we'll discover it has absolutely nothing to do with the theme. So let's just read through this. Why write a book about Super Mario Bros. 3? I'm going to assume somebody is asking that question. I am, and I'm the one writing the damn thing. He doesn't explain this at any point. A book more generally about Mario, the character, would seem to make more sense. He's an icon, the icon of the video game industry and of the medium itself. In any case, if this was to be a book of history or of popcorn iconography, surely it would be more comprehensive and sensible to cover the full breadth of Mario's career. So he's saying he's not going to do this. He's not going to cover Mario's career. And the next chapter is a brief history of Mario. Not chapter, part of the book is the history of Mario, and he just said here, I'm not going to cover Mario's career. At the time of this writing, Mario has appeared in nearly 190 games. He tries to cover all of them. 2 movies, 4 animated series, multiple comic books. A story of the creator's eminently humble beginnings of his iconoclastic creator Shigeru Miyamoto and his endurance through a changing video game landscape and sweeping cultural shifts. Would these not be more logical things to build a book around? And that's most of what the book is him talking about that stuff. And you'll get into this. I just wanted to show you this is what he claims the book is going to be about. This is his introduction. This is what he is setting out to prove. That's what you put at the beginning of a book, a nonfiction book. This is what I'm going to try to achieve in this. And he doesn't achieve it at all. And even if one did wish to focus only on the games, why limit the scope to only one out of that 190, especially when there are other games of greater historical significance? He goes through a bunch of them. Why don't you focus on those games? And as you'll see, he goes through all of those games in depth. What's the big deal? So basically, so far he's listed about Nintendo generally, Shigeru Miyamoto's development of the character, a history of Mario, and he proceeds to do all of these things in this book. So, yeah, that's not very promising. Reveal the game is overrated, perhaps? No. Then again, why? Let's see here. Some are more recent. Some is more intriguingly flawed. Some are more historically significant. Super Mario Brothers 2 has a more interesting backstory. What, if anything, are you looking to tell us here? Why should we be reading this when there are so many better books we could be reading? To be honest, I didn't start out with the intent to write a book about Super Mario Bros. 3. What you're going to see me complaining about this, and the chat complaining about this. Like, we were promised brick by brick. We were promised for him to literally go through every single frame of this, and we want that. And once you get to it, it is unendurable. It is, I can't even begin to describe how bad it is. I actually just skip all through most of it. And yet, amid all this, I felt like something was missing. An empty niche. Maybe not a large niche, but a niche all the same. In my primary career, if you can call it a career, I'm a film critic. Specifically in film writing, there is such a thing as shot-by-shot analysis, which is exactly what it sounds like, a book or more often academic paper presentation that pores over a single film piece by piece, scene by scene, detail by detail. The lines, the composition, the shots, the scores, and the actors, directors, etc. Not just an aesthetic, criticism, or history or production report, but a fusion of all three, the complete picture of the film. Why didn't this exist for video games? The idea began to take shape. Pick a game, play through it from beginning to end, catalog everything you did, even in the places where you did something wrong or had to start over. Describe in detail not just the function, but the form, the whys and hows and who's behind what was happening in the game. For good measure, who was going on for you during the playing. This is supposed to be literally brick by brick. And as we'll see, less than half of this book, let me scroll down to where he actually starts playing the game. Okay, when we actually get to him playing the game is roughly about half the book. The rest is just him talking, telling his life story, rambling on about Mario, etc. What you're about to witness is one of the most bizarre experimental books of all time. So I'm glad you joined me. There will be videos coming about MovieBob's life and his political views. What everybody's told me, though, is that if you want to understand MovieBob, if you want to understand Bob Chapman, you need to look at his book. You need to look at his book that he wrote about Mario, which is kind of an autobiography disguised as a book about Mario. This is his book, Super Mario 3 Brick by Brick. And we're going to go through the whole book.
Dedication to Gail Miyamoto for saving my life, more times than he knows. Christopher and Catherine Chipman for always being there. Peter and Patricia Chipman for everything. And in loving memory of Evangeline Chipman for setting an example. Introduction: why write a book about Super Mario Bros. 3? I'm going to assume somebody is asking that question. I am, and I'm the one writing the damn thing. A book more generally about Mario. The character
Notice that he
would seem to make more sense. He's an
Miyamoto
icon,
above his parents,
the icon of the video game
whose
industry
basement he
and the
probably
medium
still lives
itself.
in.
A character as entrenched in the minds of generations X and beyond as Mickey Mouse and Bugs Bunny. Video games were the rock and roll of my generation. Video games were the rock and roll of my generation, an art form that came into being and grew in tandem with our own lives, embraced by us to the confusion and exasperation of our parents. And though he wasn't the first icon of the form, Mario was figured at the forefront, our Elvis, or, if you prefer, our Beatles. Which probably makes Pac-Man Chuck Berry in this analogy.
Oh my
in any
god,
case,
this is so
if this were to be a
obtuse.
book of history or of pop iconography, surely it would be more comprehensive and sensible to cover the full breadth of Mario's career. At the time of this writing, Mario every conceivable gaming genre, 2 feature films, 1 live action, 1 animated and released only in Japan, 4 animated series, multiple comic books, and in nearly every form of licensed merchandising imaginable. The story of the character's eminently humble beginnings, of his iconoclastic creator Shigeru Miyamoto, of his endurance through a changing video game landscape and sweeping cultural shifts. Would these not be more logical things to build a book around?
They would, but I
And
didn't
even
want
if
to do
one
it
did
that.
wish to focus on only the games, why limit the scope to only 1 out of the 190? Especially when there are other games.
I really doubt that there's 190 Mario games. No fucking way. Like, it depends what even one counts as a video game, I guess.
In the series of greater historical significance, SMB3 is Mario's first appearance. That would be Donkey Kong, or the game that made him a household name by reviving the previously dead home gaming industry. That's the original Super Mario Bros., or the birthplace of functional, open-world 3D platforming, Super Mario 64 inches, or any of the franchise's myriad other big impact moments. It's merely the 3rd game in the Nintendo Entertainment System era of the franchise. Where's the import? Where's the story? What's the big deal? Assuming I was able to gather myself after receiving the withering barrage of queries all at once, I might offer that this book isn't precisely a book of history, though it will certainly contain its fair share, but rather a book primarily of video game criticism, which of course only begs more questions. Why start with Super Mario Bros. 3?
Okay, I hate these fucking self-indulgent opening chapters. Why write a book about ancient Persia? I just hate these fucking introductions that go on for okay, you're doing it because people find it interesting. Just get to the fucking point. Don't do this big, I'm gonna cover this in a way nobody else has ever done.
Then, it's not exactly crying out for attention. It's one of the best-selling games in the series, and of all time, already enshrined as an accepted, unassailable classic. Do you intend to challenge that status? Reveal the game as overrated, perhaps? No? Then, again, why? New Super Mario Bros. Wii is more recent. Super Mario Sunshine is the most intriguingly flawed of the series. Super Mario Bros. And Donkey Kong are more historically significant. Super Mario Bros. 2 inches has the more interesting backstory. What, if anything, are you looking to tell us here? Why should we be reading this, when there are so many tomes of self-help, political fire-breathing and 12-volume epics of glimmering vampire bow huntresses attending wizard school just a bookshelf, or a swipe across the touchpad, as it were, away? To be honest, even I didn't start out with...
In
the
other
intent
words,
to
why
learn
would
about
anyone read
Super
this
Mario
piece of
Bros.
crap?
3.
Well, I'm doing it to
The
make
format
fun of this
this
guy.
project took shape before the subject came into focus for me. You see, at least to my knowledge, at the
Okay, let's just look at this. To be honest, even I didn't start out with the intent to write a book about Super Mario Bros. 3. The format of this project took shape before the subject came into focus for me. What the fuck does that even mean? I don't... What? You see, at least to my knowledge at the time of this writing, there isn't another book exactly like this one. This guy writes like I do. He uses too many, someone who knows the parts of speech, he uses too many qualifiers. It's just, oh, get to the
time of
fucking
this
point.
writing, there isn't another book exactly like this one. Video game criticism has existed as long as the medium itself, said medium having come into being in the era of specialty publications, read, lifestyle magazines, and reached adolescence in the age of the internet. Times where it became the norm that everything was to be reviewed, critiqued, and consumer reported upon. But the form has always had an erratic evolution. The first game reviewers found themselves in the unique position of having to be both our critics. What feeling or sensation does this game elicit? And product testers, does this device work? The rapidly expanding technology of the medium and scope of the consumer base created fissures and divisions as different groups of gamers demanded different approaches from critics. Aesthetic critique, technical details. Does it have a good story? Forget the story. How does it play? Give me detailed analysis. Give me a numbered score. The internet age turned game criticism into one of digital journalism's fastest growing fields with even more diversity, detailed write-ups, and cultural commentary from websites like The Escapist,
Crap.
Polygon,
Crap.
Destructoid,
Crap.
etc. Video reviews, often, but not always, comedic in nature, became the rage with the dawn of high-speed streaming, making unlikely superstars of folks like Bitchute,
Biggest douche ever. Bigger douche.
aka
Cool guy.
the angry video game
The
nerd.
AVGN isn't a reviewer
James's
though, he's
focus
a
on older and
comedian.
more obscure titles was part of a growing interest in giving serious critical attention and hindsight to classic or retro games. Today, sites ranging from professional outlets to
Okay, I just
amateur
like to make a statement. Ben Yahtzee is the biggest fucking douchebag I've ever seen in my life. The second I hated that fucker's voice, I wanted to punch him in the fucking mouth and like just take out all his teeth and I don't know, throw him into the Australian Ocean so he could be eaten by crocodiles. I fucking hate that piece of shit. He's just this cynical douchebag who thinks because he has a British accent and he sounds sophisticated that he's somehow I just fucking hate Yahtzee. I don't know if you'll ever find anybody who hates Yahtzee more than me.
free-for-alls like YouTube and Blip are packed to the gills with an ever-growing supply of not only game criticism but walkthroughs, strategies, and long-form chronicles called Let's Plays. Name any game that has ever existed, no matter how
long-form
obscure,
chronicles.
and chances are you can find multiple reviews, videos, and full-length playthroughs of it. And yet amid all that, I felt like there was something missing. An empty niche. Maybe not a large niche, but a niche all the same. In my primary career I'm a film critic, so I get to see how criticism differs in the two mediums. And while I won't let this turn into some missive about what game journalism can learn from film, I'm inclined to note that the one type of critical attention gaming appears to be most, though not wholly, deficient of is analysis. In particular,
Okay,
deep
let's
analysis.
just reread this paragraph. This is amazing. And yet, amid all that, I felt like there was something missing. An empty niche. Maybe not a large niche, but a niche. An empty niche. Maybe not a large niche, but a niche all the same. In my primary career, I'm a film critic. So I get to see how criticism differs in the two mediums. And while I won't let this turn into some missive about what game journalism can learn from film, I'm inclined to note that the one type of critical attention gaming appears to be most, although not wholly deficient of, is analysis, in particular deep analysis. I feel like that whole thing is just really, maybe someone who knows more about grammar can like agree with me that is fucking horrible the way that's written.
Specifically, in film writing, there is such a thing as the shot-by-shot analysis, which is exactly what it sounds like. A book, or, more often, academic paper or presentation that pores over a single film piece by piece, scene by scene, detail by detail, the lines, the compositions, the shots, the score, and the actors, directors, writers, and production history that informed it all. Not just an aesthetic criticism or a history or a production report, but a fusion of all three and more, the complete picture of a film. Why didn't this exist for video games? My first thought, upon not finding books that lined up with what I was now looking for, especially not available to consumers outside the industry or academia, was that it may have been tried and found impossible. But that didn't make any sense.
Okay, let me just explain that. You can't do the same thing because video games are different. Video games normally have an engine that generates aspects of it. Not necessarily every aspect of the game is directly planned. A lot of it is just, I guess you could say, pre-generated. Like a lot of the buildings in the game are just pre-generated from existing models. So it's not really fair to go to every like scene in the game and try and analyze it for hidden meaning, because it's not always there. Now, if you're going to make the argument that you can analyze specific cutscenes or specific themes in the game or mechanics or stuff like that, then yeah, that is true, but that's been done. Like, for example, in BioShock 1, as the game went on, what you were supposed to do was use your guns less and less and your plasmids more to indicate that you were turning it more and more into a monster and less than a man, and less of a man. And that is, I guess, kind of, you can analyze that over time. So there's other things you can do like that. So you can do that analysis. It's just going to be different because it's a different art form. It's like analyzing a book word by word. A book is a much longer art form. There's often less emphasis put on a specific scene than there is on a whole. It's not fair to take something that's 20 to 30 hours long, all of which isn't pre-programmed precisely like a movie is, and compare it to a movie. They're just different. Just, I don't know, maybe that makes sense to people.
Games are tangible things, at least as much as digitized information can be. Most of them have beginnings and endings, or at least a point where nothing else can be done within them. Whole books, called strategy guides, had been written with the purpose of guiding one through a game step by step. So why not go the extra mile and gives a reader the background or an aesthetic observation about whatever level or boss you're helping them to conquer? And, if I couldn't find such a book, why not write it myself? The idea began to take shape. Pick a game. Play through it from beginning to end. Catalog everything you did, even the places where you did something wrong or had to start over. Describe, in detail, not just the function but the form, the whys and hows and who's behind.
Those exist. They're called after-action reports. Go to a Paradox forum.
What was happening in the game? For good measure, include what was going on for you during the playing. Player input is key to the experience. After all, so it's only fair to analyze the background of the player along with the background of the product. Yes, that might work, but which game? It would have to be an older game, for one. Not so much out of nostalgia or sentiment, but because an older game would have its stature already secure. Preferably it should be a popular game, one that a lot of people would have played.
Okay, I'm gonna try putting up the speed. Let me know if you can hear it okay.
In a big, visible way simply offers more to write about. It should have a certain degree of variety, if for no other reason than to keep me consistently engaged so that boredom doesn't inappropriately color the analysis, even though I wouldn't be...
Okay, I just want to say this. Movie Bob in this book is saying that it has to keep people engaged so that boredom doesn't color the analysis.
Primarily playing for fun, I'd have to endeavor to maintain the sense of enjoyment that regular gameplay is supposed to engender. Finally, I felt like it should be a game I was already intimately familiar with, a game I could not just approach, but return to in the writing. Aside from, likely, making the project that much less difficult, it would be appropriate to the intended tone. Not just some dry, academic deconstruction, but an involved, emotive journey. I should be a game I loved, and thus.
Wow, there's a spelling error. I should be a game I loved. Like I when I grew up, I wanted to be a blitzball.
There could be no other choice. Part 1, a brief history of Mario. Press start. By now, the legend of Mario's creation is old hat to fans, but those who didn't grow up marinating in the game culture still would likely be surprised at the utilitarian simplicity of his origins. Today we are used to receiving our cultural icons only after a lengthy process.
Someone else was reviewing this book and they said he just has a thesaurus. He just inserts random words. Like here, a utilitarian simplicity of its origins. That doesn't really make sense. I don't understand what that means. Game culture stew. You don't marinate something in the game in stew. I don't fucking know.
The focus grouping and demographic charting, particularly video game personalities, who must often bear the weight of cross-cultural expectations. Japanese games frequently see their androgynous heroes transformed into hyper-masculine forms to better appeal to Western taste, and navigate the minefields of socio-political symbology. Just what is the proper length of a skirt between sexually empowered and pandering male fantasy? Mario, on the other hand, came about the old-fashioned way. A character was needed, and one was made in the best form available from the tools available. And rather than a marketing team or a team of demographic analysts, Mario sprang from the mind of one man, Shigeru Miyamoto. Today, Miyamoto is a living legend, the starry-eyed iconoclast of the video game industry, spoken of by other designers less like a contemporary and more like a mysterious sorcerer who deigns to walk among mortals. But, once upon a time, he was just one among hundreds of men and women toiling in the nascent days of the game industry. Doubtlessly too hard at work to even consider that every tiny success and failure might be laying the foundations of an entirely new medium, a new form of art. Miyamoto's backstory is a mix of iconic and humble, almost perfect enough to render him as a character in one of his games. A precocious child with a great love of art, music and wilderness exploration who dreamed of growing up to be a manga, Japanese comic book, artist. Instead, he found himself working for Nintendo, a toy and playing card company that had moved into the video game business with decidedly mixed results. So goes the story. Nintendo's most recent game, and Miyamoto's first role as part of a design team, Radar Scope, had failed to replicate its popularity in Japan when it was exported to US arcades. The head of the company's newly established American branch, the nephew of its CEO, was stuck with a surplus of unwanted machines, and the decision was made to rewrite the game's program into something new so that the unsold units could be reprogrammed and their cabinets repainted. The task of conversion fell to Miyamoto, an unconventional...
Okay, so... Didn't he just say this wasn't going to be about the history of Mario? Like, he said this isn't going to be the history of this. This is going to be taking the game apart brick by brick. Not brick by brick? Who the fuck knows?
Decision, given that he was primarily an artist and designer with little experience as a programmer, but one that would prove faithful. He was given very little to go on, just the requirement that all of the programming be built from the existing parts of Radar Scope, and an early suggestion that Nintendo might be able to secure the license for Popeye the Sailor. When that fell through, he had to develop new characters in the scenario. In doing so, he was making history. For the first time, a video game's characters and story were being developed before the interface was. The early Popeye brainstorming had naturally called to mind the scenario of rescuing Olive.
If you're interested in this, read that book. It covers it way better.
The idea that players would be enticed to keep playing by the goal of having to rescue the hero's girlfriend rather than simply trying to rack up more points. Simple and arch though it may have been, this would be the first time that a game had tried to engage players.
Wait a minute. Simple and arch? Though it may have been. What does that mean? Simple and arch. Okay.
Through narrative and emotion rather than strictly through competition. Ludo was replaced by a gorilla, Donkey Kong, which in turn suggested the girl abducted by ape finale of King Kong, which in turn suggested the gameplay of scaling a building in pursuit of said ape. But the game still...
There is a really interesting story over all of this. Apparently, I think it was Universal Studios or someone sued Nintendo over Donkey Kong, which is copy fraud because Donkey Kong is obviously a parody of King Kong. There was a lawsuit, and it turned out Universal didn't actually own the rights for the game either. For the character.
The main character, an avatar for the player. It needed a hero. In keeping with his desire for the game to have characters as well defined as the hardware would allow, Miyamoto wanted his hero, whom he was still considering calling MR Video, to stand out within the game, to have recognizable human-like movements in the face. And while video game graphics of the day placed severe restrictions on such ambitions, a clever artist could find a way. And so, MR Video got a big Italian-style mustache to give his face and nose definition in profile, and would wear overalls so that his arms would be more visible against his body. They'd call him Jumpman at first, but he soon got a new nickname based on his apparent similarity to one Mario Segale, a colorful real estate mogul who was Nintendo of America's warehouse manager at the time. The finished game, Donkey Kong, was a smash hit and Mario was born. Miyamoto would revisit the character soon after in two Kong sequels and Mario Brothers, a two-player co-op game reminiscent of Joust that introduced Mario's brother Luigi and gave them a new backstory as New York City plumbers combating an infestation of crabs, bugs and turtles in a room full of pipes. Nintendo, fueled largely by the success of Miyamoto-developed games, branched out into the home video game market which had collapsed in the US but was thriving in Japan. And the ability of these Famicom games to be longer and more complex led Miyamoto to expand his newly iconic character in an unprecedented way. The Golden Age, the title told the tale. Super Mario Brothers was Mario
said he
Brothers
wasn't going to do
blown out
this,
to
but he's
proportions.
covering it.
Instead of a single screen,
Like the whole history.
gameplay would now be spread across an entire world that scrolled from left to right in the inaugural example of a genre that would come to dominate the golden age of video games. The side-scrolling platform.
I know, a lot of the games
Mario
in the
and
golden
Luigi
age
wouldn't
were
simply
pretty
be crossing
shitty.
the screen. They'd be passing through a whole world, different skies, different terrains, underworlds, even swimming underwater. And this whole world would need still more characters and stories to populate it. Mario gained the ability to grow to giant or supersize via magical mushrooms a la Alice in Wonderland, eventually leading the fairy tale-inspired kingdom of castles and magic beanstalks that was being devised. Precisely how the Mario Brothers got there from NYC is the subject of much debate, to be named the Mushroom Kingdom. The hostage rescue scenario from Donkey Kong was revived with a new damsel in distress, Princess Peach, whom Western audiences would know as Princess Toadstool for more than a decade, and the turtle enemies of Mario Brothers were expanded into an entire race of creatures called the Koopas, a reference to Kappas, mischievous turtle-like demons of Japanese mythology, ruled over by the wicked Bowser. Mario and Luigi would traverse 8 worlds split into 4 levels, each ending with the conquest of an occupied fortress and all but the last teasing the player with a rescued hostage who would inform you that the princess was in another castle. The success of Super Mario Bros. Was immediate and overwhelming. The kind of electrifying impact that only ever happens once or twice in the lifespan of a medium. In its native Japan, the game served as an eye-popping send-off for the original Famicom as Nintendo shifted focus to an upgraded disk system version.
Life in Wartime.
Life in Wartime in 1990, Mario once again led Nintendo into a new age as the ambitious Super Mario World. Super Mario Bros. 4 inches in Japan became the flagship title of Nintendo's 16-bit Super NES. And while the game was a major success, now remembered as a classic of the genre, and for introducing Yoshi the dinosaur, one of the series' most popular characters. This was the beginning of the end for Mr. Miyamoto's plucky plumber as the unquestioned king of all video game heroes.
Okay, here we go, Mario and me. Let's get to this fucking freak show. I'm sorry.
Incredible, considering how humbly I came to meet him. Part 2, Mario and Me. My life in the Mushroom Kingdom. The time before Mario and I were born the same year, 1981. I'm about 5½ months older, and as such I don't really remember a world without him. Looking back as best as I'm able, I know I must have been aware of his existence as long as I was aware of anything else, but I'll confess that I was not an immediate devotee. Arcade games, both in full...
Mario and I were born in the same year. I'm about 5½ months older. What the fuck?
Arcades and as individual machines at restaurants or convenience stores were fairly common then, so I'd certainly seen the Donkey Kong machine about. And I distinctly remember Mr. Rogers once demonstrating how arcade cabinets worked via that same machine. I remember seeing the DK cartoon show, featuring Mario, once or twice. Though it wasn't part of my regular TV viewing, He-Man was more my thing, at the time. In fact, apart from those aforementioned ventures to arcades, most often the one at good old Salem Willows Park, video games were just not much of a presence in my early life. Home gaming, a big fad in the late 70s and early 80s, was well into its famous crash when I was becoming conscious of the world around me. The only thing I really knew of it was that it was some kind of grown-up toy, since the only time I ever saw a console was when my uncle and aunt would come over to hang out, after I was supposed to be in bed, and he and my father would play through a game or two of baseball on Dad's Atari 2600, a machine that, with its black and wood panel design, looked like all the other grown-up toys, the stereo, the station wagon, that I wasn't supposed to play with. Even the marketing blitz that accompanied the launch of the Nintendo Entertainment System in 1985 didn't really intrigue me. Advertisers hadn't really figured out how to translate the fun of game playing through commercials yet, and early NES ads focused on the system's more explicitly toy-like features, ROB, a toy robot that ostensibly served as a second player in some games but in reality was Nintendo's bid to make toy stores feel more at ease stocking their product, and the Zapper-like gun. Well, I already had toy robots. Optimus Prime was much cooler than ROB, and I'd seen other toys purporting to interface with TVs that didn't look like that much fun to me.
This is so fucking awful. Oh my god.
I was with my mother, paying a visit to the home of a new friend. We'd met in kindergarten, and my mother wanted to meet his before we arranged any play dates. I was the firstborn, so research like this went into pretty much every decision. While our mothers chatted, my friend had something he wanted to show me in the kitchen. His NES, currently sitting on the kitchen table hooked up to a small TV set. And there, on the screen, was Super Mario Bros. I was captivated immediately. I had never seen a video game, at home or otherwise, look like this. Instead of the usual black background populated by conflicting neon shapes. Here was a bright blue sky with puffy white clouds over rich brown earth and green bushes. The creatures were identifiable, with eyes and feet and movement. The bricks looked like bricks. The castles looked like castles. And there was Mario, chubby, clad in unassuming overalls and his preposterous mustache, looking for all the world like no hero of anything else that I'd ever seen. I watched him play, gladly, for what seemed like forever. It was probably more like 20 minutes, before I was offered a turn myself. I was terrible at it, dying repeatedly, but I was also transfixed. This miraculous machine, to my eyes, projected a cartoon that you could control onto a TV, and there were more of them than this. Ones that looked, according to my friend, even cooler, with soldiers and bombs and cars and all manner of things, and maybe even more with this Mario person whose image now refused to leave my mind. I was mesmerized. I was hooked. I was sold. My parents, on the other hand, would take further convincing. My brother and I were not exactly hurting for playthings. A game console was quite an investment, and I can only assume they remembered that the last time a toy like this had become a big deal it hadn't lasted for very long. In addition, well, I was not the easiest child in the world to be raising at the time. I was bad at school. Mainly, I acted out in class, sassed my teachers, zoned out into daydreams, and turned in a lot of poor work.
And 30 years later, nothing has changed. So, MovieBob's talking about how he sucked at school, and being the genius that he is, this is why we should take him seriously. Cool.
So it wasn't as though I was in for some kind of attaboy reward that an NES would fill. Instead, they broke out the old Atari 2600 and said it could be mine now. Thanks to the NES, the market had come back to life and they were making games for the system again. It was no substitute for an NES, and especially not for Mario. But it was something, and looking back, starting with such an earlier form of gaming helped refine my skills and probably gave me a lot more respect for the evolution of the medium overall.
Skills.
Meanwhile, I was filling page after page and drawing paper with painstaking recreations of the vivid images I'd seen on my friend's kitchen TV, that wide open world, those fearsome enemies, that iconic hero. And this is supposed to be the part where I tell you how I got my NES, the circumstances, the reasons, how I felt, except I don't remember. That sounds ridiculous, even to me, given the subject of this book and the detail with which I recall everything else. Granted, I was 5, but still nobody is more surprised that I don't remember exactly when I got it. Christmas? Birthday? Good report card? Unlikely. Even my family didn't recall the exact details. One day I didn't have one, the next day I did. I feel strangely bad that I don't remember this. It makes me feel ungrateful, like something this important should have stuck in my head, permanently, by sheer force of gratitude. But maybe that's the point. Maybe the act of finally procuring my own direct access to Super Mario Bros. Was so monumental to my young mind it rendered everything else occurring immediately around it non-existent in my mind. What I do remember is that my young life now had a clear dividing line, pre- and post-NES. The new world in any case, I had it. My very own Nintendo and my very own copy of Super Mario Bros., both of which I could play whenever I wanted for however long I wanted, providing I kept my grades up, kept my behavior decent, and promised to share with my brother, of course. Soon enough there were games other than Mario, Duck Hunt, Balloon Fight, Ice Climber, The Legend of Zelda, Contra, the same sampler of classics a lot of Generation NES remembers. But SMB was the one I kept coming back to. Helpfully, the game was actually extremely hard to complete. I never actually beat Bowser on my own without help until years later, to be honest. My brother and I would take turns playing through, trying to get just a little bit further. Sometimes Dad would help out. For the longest time, he was the only one in the family who could do the famous one-up trick in level 3-1. The NES and Mario were the first toy that I ever loved enough to invest into the broader culture around it.
Broader
I
culture
played the game
around it.
constantly, but I also devoured any shred of information about games that I could get my hands on. I tear through books and magazines especially. It was during this research that I came to know that Mario was a plumber, for example, which made my connection to him that much stronger since that was also the profession of my grandfather, whom I adored. On the schoolyard, I learned from friends of a magazine Nintendo Power devoted only to NES games. That in and of itself was enough to interest me. The game being advertised on the cover of its 1988 inaugural issue was a dream come to life. Super Mario 2? I just had to get a subscription I did, as a Christmas gift. The first issue now hangs in a frame on my wall, and I definitely had to have that game. Like most people, I didn't find out until I was older that what Western gamers got in SMB2 was actually Doki Doki Panic, a different Japanese game from Mario's creator that had been reprogrammed to feature Mario and his friends as the playable characters. But the fact that Mario's second game was so remarkably different from the first, a whole new playstyle, new enemies, a new main bad guy named Ward, actually made me even more invested in the character and his world, now worlds, by virtue of how big it suddenly seemed. Video game sequels, at the time, were typically expansions or refinements of their predecessor. This had, of course, been the case with the real SMB2 in Japan, but here was a part 2 inches that suggested, simply by existing, that Mario was more than just the graphics and gameplay that had come first. He may not have been an especially well-developed character in the games themselves, but in my mind he was bigger and more richly drawn than any other hero in games by virtue of this newly revealed malleability.
This book isn't, like, even long. This book isn't long at all. And yet, this whole thing is just him rambling.
If Mario could fight evil in the Mushroom Kingdom and Sukken, SMB2 is said to take place in a world of dreams. There was no limit to what he could do. In between,
The world
and
of
sometimes
dreams?
during
What the
sessions of
fuck?
gaming, my imagination would be alive with what Mario and company might be saying or doing beyond the borders of the story I was playing through. Soon enough, I wouldn't have to wonder. Beyond borders, looking back at it objectively, the Super Mario Brothers Super Show was one of the most ridiculous things I ever devoted time to watching as a kid. An hour-long eyesore of self-conscious kids separated from earlier, equally baroque kiddie programming, only in that its pool of visual references were culled from Nintendo ephemera instead of circus clowns or animal puppets. One half of the thing was a blatant lift of Pee-wee's Playhouse, with pro wrestler Captain Lou Albano and character actor Danny Wells as a live-action Mario and Luigi having slapstick adventures in a basement plumbing office, also populated by wacky props and creatures where every frantic physical comedy gag was punctuated by a video game sound effect rather than the traditional boink. These scenes framed the show's main event, episodic animated adventures of Mario and company as they battled King Koopa, a fusion of Bowser and SMB2's Ward, as Nintendo hadn't informed the animators which villain would be the ongoing baddie in the games, through comic adventures and the occasional broad movie parody. Except on Fridays, where the cartoon segments switched over to a moonlighting-esque adaptation of The Legend of Zelda. Of course, I loved every minute of it. However ubiquitous Mario and games in general were to my generation were children, and children don't run the culture. So when some sliver of the culture featured one of your game heroes as a show, movie, comic, etc., you almost had to snap it up, not knowing where the next fix was going to come from. Neither the Super Show nor the various comics and books pushed out as tie-ins were high art, but it was what we had, and they helped further solidify the idea of Mario as a character with life beyond the games. This was also the first point where you started to see video games stretch beyond their separate sections at toy stores and elsewhere. There wasn't the deluge of Mario merchandise there is today, but you started to see them around, especially at smaller shops that imported bulk sundries from Japan where these things were more heavily merchandised. I found a small, sturdy figurine of Mario holding up one of the vegetables from SMB2 in a tiny outlet while vacationing in New Hampshire, and wound up carrying him in my pocket the rest of the way through grade school as a good luck totem, which I very much needed.
Okay, so this dude somehow got a figurine of Mario holding up a vegetable, and he carried it with him for the next multiple years in his pocket as a good luck charm? What the fuck? But this asshole carried around a Super Mario luck charm for a really I don't fucking know. Let's just
I
continue.
found a small, sturdy figurine of Mario holding up one of the vegetables from SMB2 in a tiny outlet while vacationing in New Hampshire and wound up carrying him in my pocket the rest of the way through grade school as a good luck totem, which I very much needed. I should stress, lest I come off as even more obsessive about these things than I actually am, that I did have other interests. I'd become a voracious reader, thanks in no small part to my Nintendo Power subscription, and a lover of science and technology, which in turn had led me to an interest in special effects, which in turn led me to a greater fascination with films and filmmaking. And I certainly had other venues of entertainment. Like many others our age, my brother and I were consumed by the world of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles for much of the late 1980s. What Nintendo and Mario were was my happy place, my constant. While I won't claim that I had anything close to an unhappy childhood, particularly compared to many of my friends, I wasn't having an easy time of pre-adolescence. I was, quite emphatically, a nerd in every sense of the word. Save for academic excellence, I had too much.
Okay, that's amazing. He's a nerd who sucked at schoolwork. In other words, he sucked at everything. He bought into a subculture that was about intellectual achievement, and he was just shit at that, too.
Of a problem with authority to be any good at schoolwork, but was still too weird and bookish to be accepted by most of my peers. Instead of dealing with this in some kind of mature fashion, I made one bad decision after another, including the classic asshole move of trying to endear myself to the cool kids by trying to join the name-calling and belittling of the other uncool kids. A part of me will probably hate myself for that until my dying day. I should probably add that I was attending a Catholic school at the time, so all my issues came packaged alongside an inseparable religious guilt to boot, and the teachers, free from the rigors of dealing with kids with serious problems like their public school counterparts, had plenty of time to devote to fixing me. I was in the principal's office a lot, and so were my parents. They tried therapy, but I developed an unhelpful hobby of reading about child psychiatry techniques and then either purposefully subverting them or smugly informing the therapist that I knew why he was doing what he was doing. I even had an...
So he was some kind of like sociopathic douchebag who was universally despised by everybody around him. Okay.
EKG, which at least required me to stay up all night beforehand watching Nick at Night and playing Nintendo, so there was that. They recommended Ritalin and other mind-altering drugs, but my parents said no. I thanked them at least once a month for that. Most reliable escape I had was almost always Mario. While I could get bored with even my favorite movies or books after a while, the games were always a little bit different every time I played, so I played them, and watched the cartoons, and read the comics and the magazines, and filled my notebooks and sketch pads in the margins of my textbooks with Mario drawings, and felt my ears perk up when rumors began to swirl of Super Mario Bros. 3 inches when it came to Mario. The rest of the world was about to catch up to me. The third AGE, the lead up to the release of SMB3, was unprecedented in video.
The third age was this fucking Lord of the Rings
game launches and definitely exceeded the pageantry surrounding the release of anything I was ever intensely interested in. Sporting events, holidays, and certain movies got big, overblown coverage. Not video games, not until now, but I never heard anything real about the making of one outside of my own fever, Nintendo-saturated imagination. The news came from encountering a fellow gamer at the campground at our fourth yearly family trip to New Hampshire. He said he'd seen a Japanese magazine showing Mario 3. He said Mario turned into a raccoon or something. What? My first look at it came from, where else? Nintendo Power, a short puff piece that was, in my mind, akin to a vision from God. Mario had a raccoon tail. It made him fly. He would dress like a frog. Bowser was...
See, my parents made the smart decision when I was that age, and they put me into therapy and they put me on medication. And that's why I'm like functional today and I'm not dead from having committed suicide. So, I don't know, if Bob's parents had have forced him to go through therapy, he probably would be more functional, but whatever.
Back and had children. This was also the first time I ever saw behind-the-scenes game development images. It may even have been the first time that I was conscious of Shigeru Miyamoto's existence as Mario's creator, and I recall buying a bunch of graph paper when I saw that was how the designers...
Okay, I don't get how this dude works. So... I don't understand how this dude works. So he spent all his time looking up stuff about Mario, but he didn't know who Shigeru Miyamoto was, or anything about Miyamoto.
We're plotting out sprite art. Actual news about the game came out in an agonizing trickle, but it didn't stop the hype from continuing to build. Local news shows ran interviews with excited store owners. Magazines that weren't about games reported on it. Every kid I knew was excited about it. And then there was a movie. Man Behind the Curtain, The Wizard is a fairly terrible movie, and also one of the most bizarre examples of a children's film ever produced. The plot is a shameless, beat-for-beat rip-off of Rain Man, recast with preteens. A kid, Fred Savage, breaks his younger brother out of an institution. He's suffering from a vaguely defined traumatic disorder, and, after discovering that said brother has an almost superhuman aptitude for video game playing, he's the wizard of the title, schemes to hustle.
I remember one time back in, what was it called again? High school, I was invited by some guys on the Something Awful forums to Shitty Movie Night, and or maybe it was Destructoid. It was one of the two. But we were watching The Wizard, and The Wizard, I actually just left because I didn't realize it was The Wizard. I thought The Wizard was going to be about video games, but it wasn't.
Their way to Las Vegas so the kid can prove his sanity by competing in a gigantic gaming competition. Like other hobby movies of the 80s, Rad for BMX bikers, Gleaming the Cube for skateboarders, it was prefixed on wish fulfillment and pandering lionization, presenting the world as young gamers wished it could be. Games were everywhere, a big enough part of the world that massive crowds would assemble for a competition, but also still large enough that gaming skills could help you thwart the will of clueless adults. For the most part, however, it's kind of a dark downer of a movie. Sad kids, angry parents, bleak backstories in the end of the 80s on Wii. Oh, and it's a Nintendo commercial too. Most movies about video games just made up their own rather than pay licensing fees. But Nintendo was
The
behind
Wizard
this
is
one, so their products and
unwatchable.
services were everywhere. Not only were the kids and adults always finding an excuse to play Nintendo games, but a nasty bad kid antagonist wields the notoriously clunky Power Glove controller like a Bong nemesis is showing off his doomsday weapon, and the Nintendo Power Game Counselors, a tip line you could call for help with any game. Gotta shout out
Okay, I have a confession. I actually liked the Super Mario Brothers movie, and I got it out of the store multiple times as a kid. It was just so crazy, so bizarre, and just, it was like David Lynch. It was like a David Lynch Mario movie. I fucking love that shit.
Well, but the real star attraction, Super Mario Bros. 3. Even with a Nintendo connection, the Wizard probably would have passed without much notice, but Nintendo and the producers had a secret weapon. The first gameplay footage of SMB3 would be revealed to Western audiences through this movie, and they made sure everyone knew about it. So, on December 15th, 1989, me and hundreds of thousands of other kids across America lined up for the Wizard. I'll admit that I was among those who fooled themselves into thinking it was a great movie for years afterwards, but on that day all we really wanted was to get SMB3 in front of our eyeballs. Just let us see it. Please, just let us see it. Now, having watched the film much more often than it deserves since then, I can likely quote about 80% of a chapter and verse. You got 50,000 points in Double Dragon. I love the Power Glove. It's so bad. Video. ARR Majadoon. He touched my breasts. California. But the climactic reveal of SMB3 is burned, no, sir, into my memory the way JFK's assassination was for my parents' generation. Or the way 9/11 would be for mine a scant 12 years from then, my God. Was it really only 12 years? In any case, the climactic reveal of SMB3 and the Wizard is an all-time marvel.
Okay, so he's comparing the reveal of Super Mario Brothers 3 to JFK assassination at 9/11. He's saying it was like as traumatic for him as 9/11 and JFK.
In the theater of the absurd, the Wizard stands stone-faced and emotionless on a preposterously over-designed stage. All smoke, lasers, and futuristic set dressing. Alongside his rivals, the Power Glove guy and the young woman. Behind them, a huge stadium crowd cheering. In front of them, towering screens displaying their individual game progress. The unctuous MC calls for quiet as he announces that the final, deciding match will test the competitors against a game that they have never, ever played before. In the crowd, the Wizard's family and road trip allies are struck with fear, believing his special gift contingent on his familiarity with the games he plays to the exclusion of all other extrovert engagement. Back up on the stage, the MC's guttural ballad proclaims the words, Super Mario Bros. 3. And there it is, the title screen, the flashing yellow 3. A map screen in a Mario game, the troopers are back, the Goombas too, and question blocks. Yes. The raccoon tail, we didn't know to call it a tanuki yet, exists and it does make you fly. Was that a giant Goomba? In the film, the Rocky-esque suspenseful score drowns out the game's sounds, but in the theater the audience drowns out the film's very tone. This is meant to be a tense, will he or won't he contest to earn the happy ending, but we couldn't care less. This is what we came for. It's arrived. Our victory is achieved. Across the country we sat there, jaws agape and hearts racing, as the most important thing that had ever happened blazed across the screen and before our eyes months before any of us would be playing it. Oh, the wizard wins, by the way, proving his mettle and reuniting his broken family. Not that anyone really cared. Super Mario Bros. 3 was real. We'd seen it. Now we just had to keep waiting to play it. The Mountaintop SMB3 came out on February 12, 1990, and, thanks to my sainted mother, within a few days I had a copy of my very own to play. For once I was the actual first on my block, and within my own circle of friends, to have it. Since the subsequent...
The reason that Movie Bob turned out differently than DSP is his mother bought him the Wolverine toy, whereas DSP's mother didn't.
The bulk of this book is dedicated in part to my memories of playing through the game. I'll avoid preemptively repeating myself here. Instead, I'll try to convey as best I'm able what every other part of my world, gaming and otherwise, was like outside the game. What sticks out, what I remember most of all, was that this was the first time Mario peaked in the popular culture. The absolute height of his fame and renown during the period when he was the unquestioned king of video game heroes. As such, it was the first, and, for a long period, last, time that the rest of the world and I were almost in sync. SMB3 was the children's media story of the moment. The first opinion poll showing that kids worldwide recognized Mario equally or more so than Mickey Mouse were being breathlessly touted as "Hey boomers, you got OLD." Newswire puff pieces, and the rest of the world was finally waking up to what my generation of youngsters, and none more so than me, had known for years. The little fat guy with the mustache and the overalls was the coolest thing on the planet. The Super Show had long since slipped from first-run airwaves, but a new series based exclusively on SMB3 had taken its place, not in syndication, but in a Prime Network Saturday morning spot. There were Mario t-shirts, toys, and knickknacks in real stores, not just game-centric outlets or gray market import shops. Morning news shows covered the phenomena. There was even an SMB3 Happy Meal at McDonald's, the ultimate symbol of something having made it to an 8-year-old, at least. All in all, it felt a little bit like at least some of the differences between me and the rest of the world might have just been a matter of me being ahead of the curve, and now everything else was catching up.
Yep, Movie Bob was so cool, he was ahead of the curve.
This, I thought, was the beginning of a new and better world. It was actually the beginning of the end. A boy goes to WAR marketing, especially youth marketing, in the 90s was all about dividing and conquering, establishing an identity for your product, encouraging a less attractive identity for a rival product, and getting consumers to flock to you to claim that good identity for themselves. We got a taste of this in the 80s with the Cola Wars, and Nike essentially started a race war among my sports fan friends by selling the Magic Shoe, and the Bird Shoe concurrently at the height of the Celtics-Lakers rivalry.
What the fuck? Nike started a race war among my sports friends by selling shoes? What the fuck?
But it was the great console war of the 90s that first drew me into that kind of corporate manipulated madness. As the new decade dawned, Nintendo had released the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. I got mine for making it out of the 5th grade without a single grade below a CR. The triumph of lowered expectations. And with its Super Mario World, I still insisted on calling it Super Mario Bros. 4.
So his parents gave him more video games because he got he didn't get any grades below C in the 5th grade? Is it even possible to get grades below C in the 5th grade? In Canada, I don't think you even can. I think you have to literally just not go to class to get C grades that low. I don't really know. It doesn't make any sense. Bottom line, Movie Bob was retarded.
Mario World until Super Mario World 2. Yoshi's Island ended my hopes of seeing the series numbers climb into the double digits. I played the hell out of SMW, obviously, and while I love those gorgeous 16-bit graphics, the expanded number of buttons, and Yoshi the dinosaur most of all, I knew almost immediately that SMB3's by the ironclad stature as my favorite game of all time was in no danger of being challenged. The cape wasn't as cool as the tail, and I missed all the fun power-up suits. But whatever, it was the 90s. Video games had arrived as the coolest ticket in popular culture. The arcades were in the midst of a brand new boom, driven largely by a new generation of more violent games aimed at teenagers. Mario and Nintendo were the acknowledged kings of video games, and Bob Chipman, formerly Bob the Dork who's way too into his dorky video games, was now Bob the guy who knows everything about the world's hottest new pastime. Why, yes ma'am, I can tell you the best place to build up your EXP in Final Fantasy. What's that, sir? You can't quite make it through TMNT 2? Let me show you a code that might help. Pathetic fantasies, even for a 10-year-old, but that's really how I figured things were going. Hell, maybe that's how they were for just a moment, but that moment didn't last. The Sega Corporation had always existed as Nintendo's principal US rival. Others had come and gone. For a minute there we were all excited about the TurboGrafx-16. Ask your parents how that worked out, but they were the constant. Not so much a Pepsi as a Brain X with a small but loyal following. Their Genesis console had been out for a few years already, touting its 16-bit graphics versus the NES and dipping a toe into the waters of combative marketing with the Genesis Does What Nintendo campaign. But they never had a Mario, with apologies to Alex Kidd fans, no, just no, and they never had any momentum beyond that of the loyal opposition. But when the SNES hit, removing the one advantage the Genesis had, Sega decided to go big or go home. Sega declared war. With the instantly popular Sonic the Hedgehog as their new mascot, Sega marketing switched gears from passively lauding what their products offered to aggressively attacking what Nintendo's didn't. It was, I realize now, a brilliant strategy. While games have never been bigger, the generation of kids who made them big, my generation, were aging into double digits and soon their teens, where the pressure to cast aside childish things could have spelled doom and medium, even though they were still mostly pumping
This
out the
is
same
this is
animal
how
mascot,
depressing
and
his
inspiring
childhood
adventure and
was.
sci-fi fantasy heroes that
His
had
like
dominated leading up to that point by positioning
his whole
the
childhood
Genesis
he
as the
talks
core
about it
and,
being
by
like
extension, more mature
super
alternative to Nintendo
depressing
Mario. Sega was making an arcade to
because
keep
there
your
was
console
like this
plugged in,
war
even as you
between the
started
different
shoving your Ninja Turtles and
consoles,
G.I. Joes to the back
and
of
this
the
was
closet
like the
with a
single.
foot of
This
the
was how
onset.
bad his
Nintendo
childhood
responded to the
was.
war by battening down the
I wish
hatches,
this
taking
was the
almost no
biggest
shots
issue
to
I
their
had to
heads
worry
and
about
relying
during
on the
my
potency of their
childhood.
longtime fans' devotion to carry them. This would become their definitive corporate behavior for years to come. Sega's campaign, on the other hand, was relentless and blunt in the way that only 1990s salesmanship could be. In Genesis commercials, sleazy store owners tried to steer customers away from the sleek, sexy Genesis toward the disinteresting SNES. While a stodgy old maid censor mock blast of Sonic while wondering, why can't he be more like the nice boy, Mario? In playgrounds and schoolyards across the country, young gamers chose sides and memorized their talking points for a while there. I was able to rattle off the exact numerical superiority of the SNES's on-screen color palette and the advantages of Mode 7 scaling and rotation capabilities. But it didn't matter. Sega wasn't selling games, they were selling a label, a shoebox-sized hunk of plastic and microchips that said you were on the cool team. Nintendo, playing the long odds, did themselves no short-term favors by maintaining a strict family-friendly image just as violent games were becoming the rage in arcades. When it came time to port Mortal Kombat to home consoles, they handed Sega the mother of all PR victories when Nintendo opted for a bloodless, censored version while Genesis offered an authentic translation. Just like that, my life was the ending of a downer Twilight Zone episode. Video games were in and I was still out for a brand new
Yeah, but where
In
is
case you're
Sega
wondering,
now?
it would never have
And
crossed
where's
my mind to
Nintendo
try
now?
begging Mom and Dad for a Genesis, since they'd never go for it. In those days, having two game consoles was seen as an almost profane extravagance for a child, like having a weekend.
I also have a
animation theater
Sylveon
movie. I
plushie.
think I had
We've
one
been
friend
over
who had
this.
both, and it was because his parents were divorced and his SNES lived at his father's house. Besides, I was Team Mario. Sega wasn't just his enemy, it was mine too. To a 12-year-old, that made sense. Hitting the wall outside the gaming world itself, the cultural import of Mario and friends seemed to be waning. In 1991, a new cartoon based on Super Mario World came and went, and even my overly forgiving eyes knew it was awful. Sonic had two series at the same time, both popular, and one, running on Saturday mornings, that's still remembered as one of the better cartoons of the 90s. Meanwhile, consoles were no longer exclusively driving the penetration of gaming franchises into the popular culture. Arcades were in the beginning of what would be their last big hurrah, and mega-popular series like the aforementioned Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter 2 were enthralling the popular imagination. Video games had never been more visible outside of their original niche, but it was looking as though Mario might be slipping into the background, a bygone hero from a bygone age. Unless, of course, he could be the one who conquered the one height of mainstream success that no other game hero had successfully surmounted, Hollywood. In 1993 there was Super Mario Bros., the movie, a live-action mess that barely resembled the games and that I prepared for with a zeal matching that for the Wizard. It was terrible, a generic 90s junkyard sci-fi dud in the mold of John
Fuck you, that movie
failed
was
so
awesome.
spectacularly at the box office and so profoundly horrified Nintendo and Miyamoto that they are reputed to have turned down every American movie and TV offer since. These are things I know now, of course. When I first read an official confirmation of an honest-to-goodness Mario movie in the pages of Mario Mania, an SMW strategy guide from Nintendo Power that included a 32-page character retrospective which I reread often enough to qualify it as an unofficial precursor to this book, all I could feel was excitement. Finally, that there would one day be a live-action Mario movie had been a dream and an inevitability as long as I could remember. He-Man had a movie. Superman and Batman both had movies.
Yeah, but
hell, Teddy Ruxpin
but
had a
He-Man's
live-action
movie was shit.
Great things got movies.
So is
Mario
Teddy
was the greatest
Ruxpin's.
thing. So Mario would get a movie, and I'd get to see the Mushroom Kingdom looking as grand and astonishing as I'd always imagined it. So when I read this official announcement from Nintendo Power, surely the only trustworthy source on such matters, I was elated not so much by discovery as by nearness. I was already waiting, and now
Okay,
my
fuck it,
wait
I'm gonna
was
have to skip ahead. This is unbearable.
Things fall apart. High school and junior high before it was not quite the party that saved by
Wasn't
the
this
bell,
whole
and
thing
John Hughes
supposed to be
promised
an
my
analysis
generation,
of
to say
Super
the
Mario
least. I was
Brothers
still
3,
locked into the Catholic
brick
school
by
track.
brick?
My brother would be in junior high before our parents figured out it just wasn't worth it. But whereas my primary school had been an uneventful little place, my high school was another story. Private and Catholic, but still very much downtown, mostly populated by Italian, Irish and Greek hoodlums whose families mainly paid tuition to keep them from having to go to the same schools as the somehow worse black and Latino hoodlums. In my memories, the great console wars dragged on like my own private Vietnam, and it didn't help that I was still constantly in trouble.
Yes, I have to copy and paste that. That is the greatest quote of all time. The console wars. What the great own personal
At school and in and out of therapy at the time for anger, attention and authority issues. However, it really only lasted a couple of years. In 1994 the Sony PlayStation came out. Unlike countless third challenger consoles before, it stuck around. The war was now more of a scattershot fracas, and since this was the booming Clinton economy, it was less unusual
Scattershot fracas? What the fuck is a scattershot fracas?
to see more than one brand of console to a household, particularly since Generation NES was speeding toward young adulthood with pockets full of their
Who the fuck says Generation NES? What the fuck does that mean?
own disposable income. The identity conflict of the Mario vs. Sonic days gave way to a maturity conflict. Sony, the first successful
Oh my...
gaming-only business, built the PlayStation, which, for reasons I forget, we felt obligated to shorten as PSX at the time, to look more like a VCR or stereo from a distance and utilize CDs instead of cartridges. That plus marketing campaigns emphasizing sports sims and other games targeted at older teens and college students drew a stark contrast between the machine and those from Nintendo or Sega with their candy-colored exteriors, toy guns and inescapable legacy as having originated as childhood playthings. The symbolism was unavoidable. PlayStation Gaming said, I'm a gamer, but I've grown up. Still having your SNES plugged in? You might as well still be sleeping with a teddy bear. What made it especially rough, not as rough, I stress, as the more universal miseries of junior high and high school life, for me was how true that symbolism actually was. To be a geek about anything usually requires a level of investment that originates most often in childhood, meaning that geek culture is largely a culture of people holding on to vestigial pieces of their own childhoods. I still play
Okay,
video
I'm gonna skip ahead a bit. This is the worst. Oh my god. Let's see here. Let's see what this is.
Like SMRPG, Yoshi's Island offered the tantalizing prospect of a more narrative-oriented Mario adventure and the irresistible idea of finally setting up a Super Mario Bros. Continuity. The game was a prequel, set long before the events of even Donkey Kong, presumably, wherein the wizard caretaker of a still infant baby Bowser foresees the coming of the Mario Brothers and schemes
This
to kidnap them
dude
as babies from the storm.
somehow
Since this is a Mario
managed
game
to
change history. Things go wrong, and baby Mario winds
make
up
a
in the can of
timeline
Yoshi
for the
they
Mario
actually met before.
series.
On a quest to rescue his brother. The idea of seeing Mario's origin story had me playing through this game like a man possessed, even though by that point a teenage social life was leaving less and less time for gaming. I knew
You
then,
didn't have a
I figured,
social life,
Mario
that's a
and
lie.
Luigi would find their way back to Brooklyn. Along with seeing their Earthrealm digs visualized for the first time in the game, I was intrigued to see if any indications would be made about how and why they found their way back to Mushroom Kingdom years later. The possibilities. And so, after a climactic battle against a towering, Godzilla-sized Bowser, another image I'd always wanted to see, I settled in to watch as the game's ending credits played out over an animation of the stork-flying baby Mario and Luigi back home. Any moment now, I just knew I'd see a 16-bit New York skyline come into view. But, instead, the closing text and final image tell a different story, as the brothers are delivered to where Mom and Dad live. The Mushroom Kingdom. What? Mario and Luigi were born in the Mushroom Kingdom? That doesn't make any sense. How'd they grow up in Brooklyn, then? Were they sent there at some point, like Superman, unaware of their new origins?
Fuck?
And how were they Italian Americans if they came from a world with no Italy and no America?
What
Ooh,
the
maybe that'll be the plot
fuck?
of the next game. Maybe. I didn't have a breakdown or anything.
Okay, he actually thought Mario and Luigi came from Brooklyn. He thought Mario and Luigi were born in Brooklyn, then were kidnapped and went to Yoshi's Island, and then they were taken to the Mushroom Kingdom. What? I don't get it. This is his, like, like he can't take, like, he's having a mental breakdown over this. I don't fucking know. Let me just listen to
It's
this
not
again.
as though I was knocked into some kind of system shock over this, but the dissonance stuck with me for a while. By now I had more important things to worry about in school and life to be completely consumed by this. College prep.
Okay, here we go. I gotta re-listen to this. This is insane.
They'd actually met before, on a quest to rescue his brother. The idea of seeing Mario's origin story had me playing through this game like a man possessed, even though by that point a teenage social life was leaving less and less time.
Well, he
for
didn't have
game.
a social
I knew
life.
the end. I figured Mario and Luigi would find their way back to Brooklyn, along with seeing their Earthrealm digs visualized for the first time in a game. I was intrigued to see if any indications would be made about how and why they found their way back to Mushroom Kingdom years
No
later.
one
The
ever thought
possibilities.
that they came
And so,
from
after a climactic battle against a
Brooklyn.
towering,
That was
Godzilla-sized
just a
Bowser,
joke.
another image I'd always wanted to see. I settled in to watch as the game's ending credits played out over an animation of the stork-flying baby Mario and Luigi back home. Any moment now, I just knew I'd see a 16-bit New York skyline come into view. But, instead, the closing text and final image tell a different story, as the brothers are delivered to where Mom and Dad live. The Mushroom Kingdom. What? Mario and Luigi were born in the Mushroom Kingdom? That doesn't make any sense. How'd they grow up in Brooklyn, then? Were they sent there at some point, like Superman, unaware of their real origins? And how were they Italian Americans if they came from a world with no Italy and no America? Ooh, maybe
because
the
there's
plot of the next
nothing
game.
ever in
Maybe.
fiction
I didn't have a breakdown
that's
or anything.
like
It's not
based
as though I
on
was
the
knocked
real
into some kind
world.
of system shock over this, but the dissonance stuck with me for a while. By now I
I
had
don't
more
even
important
know
things to
what
worry about in school and life to be completely consumed by this. College prep classes, girls, sex, drugs, and social hierarchy were giving me my headaches. High school, after all, that refuge was Tim's ever so slightly with doubt. It wasn't that Not From Brooklyn changed anything fundamental, but it felt so cavalier. That it wasn't presented as a surprise drove home the reminder that most of what Generation NES considered canon for its games was often just hastily composed film mythos for US and copy. And part of the story I'd been devoted to might have just been a narrative placeholder for Nintendo.
So now he's talking about it like this fucking like it's some sort of conspiracy that Nintendo covered up. Like that Nintendo covered up the birth of Mario. Like that for years they claimed that he was born in Brooklyn, and then they suddenly pulled a baited switch on him. And like it seems like it shattered him on the fundamental level to find out that Mario and Luigi weren't actually from Brooklyn. I didn't know anyone who ever thought they came from Brooklyn. Like, did anybody here ever think they came from Brooklyn? I don't know. Whatever.
If I'd learned to keep my Nintendo worship relatively in check in the cigarette is cooler days, I could hold it back for the age of everything but PlayStation is for kids. Mario games had been my thing, my refuge from everything else when I needed them. Now that refuge was Tim's ever so slightly with doubt. It wasn't that Not From Brooklyn changed anything fundamental, but it felt so cavalier. That it wasn't presented as a surprise drove home the reminder that most of what Generation NES considered canon for its games was often just hastily composed.
Wait a minute, there was no canon. It's like that bullshit timeline that they released for Zelda, which I don't believe for a second. There wasn't a canon. It was like, I don't know, the idea that there's a canon and that there's kind of a consistent mythos came about much later. And they tried to retroactively apply things from the past and fit them into that mythos. But no, Mario and Luigi are just two humans from the Mushroom Kingdom who happen to be culturally Italian. Because it's a fucking work of fiction, and it doesn't have to conform to the real world cultures and whatever.
For mythos for US and copy. And part of the story I've been devoted to might have just been a narrative placeholder for Nintendo. There's
was
a
all
moment
a lie.
vitally important in the development of any geek, nerd, or whatever else you want to call it when it finally sinks in all the way that the people creating whatever character or property you've let colonize a part of your imagination just aren't as devoted to it as you are. That, to them.
There's a moment vitally important in the development of any geek, nerd, or whatever else you want to call it, when it finally sinks in all the way that the people creating whatever character or property you've let colonize a part of your imagination just aren't as invested in it as you are. To them, it's a job, but for me, it was so much more.
For me, this was it. How much sense did it make to be trying to work out the bigger relationships between the characters and the broader scope of their world? What was the point of keeping meticulous mental, and, yes, also physical, lists and chronologies of Mario's friends, enemies, worlds, abilities, all that? What did it matter if I could point out, on a moment's notice, that no Cobbins, exploding shell troopers, were only found in Saracel and only in one game? Why should I put so much of myself into this when Mario's masters couldn't even keep his
Because
origins
you're
straight?
fucking
It all
autistic.
happened so gradually, and in the background of so many
And you
bigger
just made a
films
bunch of
it
shit
didn't
up that
register
wasn't
until
there.
much later. But this was probably a turning point for me as much as it was for Mario. Young adulthood now coming into full effect. It was the best possible time to free up some mental space now that school and life choices were going to start counting for something. I had college to...
So his entire life was changed because Mario didn't come from Brooklyn. This was like the greatest trauma in his life.
Get ready for the career path to start actually charting. I'd long since transitioned from filmmaking to game designing as a dream trajectory. It was time to move on, if only a bit, from Mario and Nintendo, just not all at once. The last stint in 1996, I was a sophomore in high school. Bill Clinton was dutifully pretending that Bob Dole presented any kind of challenge to his second presidential term. But for me and millions of others still playing Generation NES gamers, the biggest thing happening was the Nintendo 64. The path into this next generation of consoles had been an awkward one for the house Miyamoto built and a trying time for their stalwart fans. After a series of fits and starts that included the disastrous Virtual Boy platform, Nintendo wound up skipping the 32-bit race entirely, getting by on the success of mega hits like Donkey Kong Country and Yoshi's Island, while bolstered by the aging SNES's stability in a market that was otherwise in total chaos. Sega's Genesis had collapsed under the weight of poorly realized peripherals, and their two subsequent consoles, Sega CD and Saturn, en route to 1999's Dreamcast, suffered from poor sales in North America. The PlayStation was moving units but hadn't quite landed a killer app of its own. So it was announced with some fanfare that their next console would leap ahead into the 64-bit realm, and would use the new power to take video games all the way into the third dimension. And, as ever, Mario would lead the way. Of course, 3D had a place in gaming from the very beginning. Vector-based arcade titles like Star Wars made shapes from glowing lines. PC fare like Wolfenstein and Doom sent players wandering down flatly decorated hallways made from perspective warp 2D surfaces, and SNES titles like Mario Kart and Pilot Wings simulated three-dimensional space via mode 7-inch scaling and rotation. But times before, however, they had a viable escape option. Sony was only too happy to have them, and a sea change was signaled when Squaresoft announced that Final Fantasy, a mega-popular RPG franchise that had always lived under the Nintendo umbrella, was jumping ship to Sony for its 7th installment. For a time, veterans of the first console war like myself tried to mount a vain, half-hearted defense, more out of nostalgia for the last conflict than passion for this one. But the writing was on the wall. Final Fantasy VII became an instant, generation-defining classic. More and more long-time Nintendo developers bailed from the good ship Mario, and it soon became clear that the hemorrhaging of games and gamers from Nintendo was not going to stop. Instead of being the beginning of a new era, Super Mario 64 inches wound up being Mario's last big traditional game, for a while his only adventure title, outside of the offbeat RPG Paper Mario on the N64. Mascot multiplayer games would be his jurisdiction for the rest of the console's lifespan. Mario Kart 64, 3 entries in the Mario Party virtual board game series, and perhaps most importantly Super Smash Bros., a fighting game whose roster was comprised of Nintendo characters, an idea I was hoping someone would execute for as long as I'd been gaming. But by then reality was crystallizing. My brother and I had a PlayStation and even the ill-fated Dreamcast, and even I had to concede that the wait between worthwhile N64 games was just too long. Even for me, the Nintendo age was over. A decade in darkness. I don't know that there was an exact moment in time when I effectively stopped playing video games. I just know that it happened. I don't recall a single moment when I simply said I'm done, especially since I never really fully quit cold turkey. All I can say for sure is that in one moment the vast majority of my free time was spent playing, reading about, and thinking about video games, and then it wasn't anymore. Despite its place in the overall narrative, I honestly don't feel like it was strictly a result of the first age of Nintendo coming to a close for my generation.
The first
Though I imagine
age
it
of
helped.
Nintendo?
The first sign of it was that I was spending more time dwelling in the gaming community than I was actually playing the games. Reading about the launch of Nintendo Powers America online site was my introduction to the concept of internet chat rooms and message boards, and it spurred me, and, with some nudging, my family, to finally get a good internet connection so that I might use them. I devoured the world of the early internet, particularly gaming sites. The hours once spent replaying my favorite games were replaced by hours of chatting and arguing about new ones. A new normal of gaming developed in my house. I learned about games, and my younger brother and sister did the playing. Mostly, though, it was a semi-unconscious decision about time management. High school had me focused on my career prospects. Soon enough I'd have my first job, clerking for a Blockbuster.
Clerking for a
My other internet
Blockbuster,
fixation,
that's his,
movie sites, had
his
reawakened
great
my other deep
achievement in
passion for
life.
filmmaking in a major way. For the first time I had a career path that seemed more attractive and more plausible than game design. Get into the movies. Writing, directing, special effects, maybe even criticism, just get into the movies. With all this on my plate, something had to give, and somewhere along the line video games became that something. Thing is, as much as I was leaving games behind, it felt as though they were also leaving me behind. Gaming was rapidly changing from a geek subculture to something like the mainstream, and with more of my attention diverted elsewhere I recognized it less and less every time I looked. Even Nintendo wasn't the Nintendo.
Okay, let me just scroll ahead. This is unbearably boring. Okay, what is this?
Meanwhile, my second Blockbuster job led me to what seemed at the time like a stroke of great fortune. An older gentleman, who will remain nameless, came in asking if he could leave some flyers. Turns out, he was starting up a film criticism show for local cable access television and was looking for on-air talent. Store policy said I had to tell him no, but it said nothing about me volunteering for the position myself. After a set of meetings and conversations, I was hired to do the show along with this person and a female co-host. The resulting show was what you'd expect from local cable, but it was exposure and a chance to work on my craft, such as it was. I was the colorful member of the team, the younger guy with the wild opinions and the deeper film knowledge. It was a fun time while it lasted. I'd never gotten much of a sense that anything was especially off about the guy running the show. I knew he was fairly conservative politically, ex-military and an ex-cop, but it had never come up in any kind of negative way. But upon the release of Mel Gibson's The Passion of Christ, and the controversy surrounding it, something seemed to change in him. I was fairly certain both co-hosts knew that I'd seen the film and hadn't cared for it, and expected it would make a good show when we sat down to review it. Instead, I got a phone call, and an unnervingly scary life experience. My employer, though, for the record, I wasn't technically being paid for my services on the show, summoned me to a meeting in his van, in an empty parking lot early in the morning. He did freelance security work, or he said he did, at least, and was on the job. This set off more red flags than I could count, but I showed up to meet him. He presented me with a printout of a scathing blog review I'd posted after seeing the film the first time, and wanted to know what I had against Jesus Christ. Unwisely, I offered that my objection was to the anti-Semitism in the film and was told those people had Schindler's Lists. Now this is our turn. I was then told that.
So in other words, his boss was woke, and he got fired for being a cuck. His boss his boss sounds awesome. This also doesn't sound like the truth at all. This so sounds like something he just made up.
Would be using the passion discussion as an occasion to promote the film's positive message, and that if I wouldn't go along by saying I liked the movie, my time on the show would be over. And that was that. I never heard from the guy again, but I know his show didn't last long without me. I'm told he behaved in a manner, because it's hearsay I won't get into specifics, that disturbed the production staff during the taping of the Passion episode, and that my name had come up, which had me walking around more than a little paranoid for a few weeks. But nothing ever came of it.
That doesn't sound like the truth at all. That sounds like something he made up.
By then, I'd been selling movies for almost a decade, and while my time away from the medium left me a little shaky on the names and faces.
What the fuck? So he spent over a decade after high school selling Blockbuster.
After that, around 2005, if I recall correctly. But my ongoing friendship with a co-worker from the first Blockbuster was able to finagle me a job with him at Best Buy, where I soon found myself moved from a morbid grind in the appliances department. Yes, we can swap the hinges on the fridge. Yes, the ice maker needs to be hooked up to water supply to the DVD, music and video games department. That was in those days the profit-driving centerpiece of any big electronics store. By then, I'd been selling movies for almost a decade, and while my time away from the medium left me a little shaky on the names and faces, who were all these people and creatures on the Xbox and PS2 boxes? The skill set translated to selling games pretty handily. As you'll no doubt intuit, it was hard to be around video games, even as a salesman, and not be drawn back toward them. But, in truth, I'd been nudging my way back for a while by then. It had been, for sure, a closet. The N64 was living in my sister's room. My brother had the GameCube and PS2 at college. But gaming had changed in my absence, and one of those changes had been that the console in your room was no longer the sole home of a serious gamer, and this change had been led by some old friends. I don't think I ever came right out and said I'm done with Mario, but even if I had, it turned out he wasn't done with me.
What the fuck does that mean? Is Mario some kind of stalker? I'm not done with Mario, but it turns out he wasn't done with me. Is it like Mario becoming a serial killer in this? Oh my god. What the fuck is this nonsense? So this is not an autobiography. This is supposed to be... This was his suicide note. It's supposed to be... He even says at the beginning, this is an analysis of Super Mario Bros. 3. This is not a history of Super Mario Bros. 3. This is not me just talking about my life. This is not me talking about the video game industry. It's... So he literally made this fucking massive bullshit to he made this fucking like massive bullshit book to try to like do an analysis of Super Mario 3, the kind at which where no one had ever done before, and he wasn't going to talk about the video game industry. He wasn't going to talk about the history of Mario. He was just going to analyze every single frame of Super Mario Brothers 3. But he wound up not analyzing any aspect of Super Mario 3, and it's just this rambling about what a fucking loser he is and how his life was over the day that Super Mario wasn't from Brooklyn. Okay, so I'm gonna end this part of it. As people are saying, this is a desperate cry for help and a suicide note. And we are back, ladies and gentlemen, as we continue our trip into MovieBob's own private Vietnam. Let us continue. So where we last left off, I think he was rambling on about his
Daybreak for
something
most
about
of my
his
time
life.
between the Blockbuster #2 and Best Buy years of employment. Part of my regular schedule included weekend nighttime hangouts with my Suncoast originating group of friends, which almost always involved playing some video games. Halo and Halo 2 on the Xbox were the games of choice at first. Not my favorite thing, but shooting is fun. But soon it was discovered that the GameCube, Mario Party titles, and Super Smash Bros. Melee were better compatible with half-drunken revelry. But as much as I enjoyed them in that context, I didn't rush out to get my own copies. It was something I did over those guys' house. What it did spur me to do was start paying more attention to my own games department and spend more time browsing gaming sites online and game stores during mall walks. And it was during one such jaunt of casual browsing that something extraordinary caught my eye. Boxes labeled NES Classics, with vintage-style cover art advertising that they contained direct ports of NES-era games for the Game Boy Advance. Their presence made me smile, but by then I'd gotten used to the idea of Golden Age ports on new systems.
Who the fuck
What
calls
I
it
saw
the
next
Golden
time,
Age other
though,
than this
would have
asshole?
induced an honest to God spit take had I been drinking anything at the time. A Game Boy Advance, Advance SP, if you want to be technical.
I have an
about it,
Advance
painted
SP.
and
That was like the
designed to
best
resemble an
console
NES.
ever.
I had to have it. Impulsive, yes, but I was unable to resist the opportunity to carry the good old days in my pocket. Now I needed games. What I managed to miss during my break was that, while Mario and the rest of the Nintendo menagerie had slipped from the top shelves of the console scene, their power and influence had grown 1,000-fold in the realm of handhelds.
Who the fuck talks like
had run the
this?
show effectively unchallenged for so many cycles that it still had potency in the age of Nintendo's newer handheld, the DS, and game stores were filled with low-priced GB and GBA games.
How could he not know about the GBA? The GBA was a masterpiece. There's so many good GBA games.
Was awash in power, continuations of my beloved 8 and 16-bit eras. And there were Mario games, lots of Mario games. Re-releases of the classics, the two LAN titles I still had from before, and even Mario and Luigi, Superstar.
I mean, this
Saga,
guy,
which played like an even more satirical.
He kind of reminds me a bit of DSP. Like DSP missed like 20 years of gaming because he was playing Street Fighter 2 for 20 years. Like, let me think of some classics on the GBA. We got Tactics Ogre Knight of Lotus. We got the Fire Emblem games, all 3 of them, although only 2 were available in North America. You have 3 great Castlevania games. You have the Mega Man Battle Network series. You got a lot of good RPGs. Nintendo portable consoles have always had amazing libraries. Whenever Nintendo kind of lets down their more adult fan base on the more console side of things, they always have amazing content for their portables. But he didn't know that because he's retarded.
Mario RPG. GBA,
Pokemon games that do.
Was my constant companion, only useful for passing time sitting in the car after work, waiting for the rest of the house to go to sleep before heading home. I promise that last part isn't actually as sad as it.
Golden Sun. What the fuck does... Okay, let me just... Sorry, guys. I just have to stop sometimes. Okay. My GBA and soon my DS was a constant companion, particularly useful for passing time sitting in the car after work, waiting for the rest of the house to go to sleep before heading home. What the hell does that mean? What does that mean? He, like, waited in his car because his parents, like, were so ashamed of him they didn't want to see him come in after being a blockbuster? I don't even know what that means. Let's re-listen to this.
The two LAN titles I still had from before, even Mario and Luigi, Superstar Saga, which played like an even more satirical follow-up to Super Mario RPG. GBA, and soon enough a DS, was my constant companion, particularly useful for passing time sitting in the car after work, waiting for the rest of the house to go to sleep before heading home. I promise that last part isn't actually as sad as it sounds. You see, around the same time I had picked up another hobby, making silly videos on the internet. I'd acquired some basic editing software with a new camcorder at one point, and had gotten reasonably good at using it in my college film classes. Those days were the Wild West for web video. Connections just fast.
He sounds so much like your father, or some other. I don't know. He sounds like some kind of person too who is talking about something like back in the 1920s.
Quiet and computer access to actually make use of it was when everyone else had hit the sack. I was getting pretty good at cutting together silly mock trailers, but had far greater amusement watching the more polished shows other guys were putting out. James Rolfe, another aspiring movie maker, was transforming into an internet.
Don't bring James Rolfe into this.
Nerd almost overnight, establishing excitable generals or rants about obscure stuff from his childhood as the most popular web video genre going. A few years later, a British-born Australian gamer named Yahtzee Crawshaw became overnight the first superstar video game.
Fuck Yahtzee. Yahtzee was shit. And is shit.
Animated review show Zero Punctuation was picked up by an online game magazine called The Escapist. I'd like to say that I saw my future then struck by visions of a new path forward by a beam of sunlight down from heaven. But the truth is, I didn't have the slightest inkling that I might have stumbled into a useful career.
A useful career?
Thus far,
nothing about his career has been useful.
Film studies degrees in my gradually reawakening video game fixation. My mind was focused elsewhere, both at work and at play. I'd come back to Mario and Nintendo fandom, but as a nostalgia infusion, something to keep on the memory shelf of He-Man and Little League trophies. And then, something started to stir. What's old is new, as it turned out. I wasn't the only generation NES 20-something using Nintendo handhelds to reconnect with the burgeoning retro scene. Publishers were seeing the numbers. Alongside re-releases, new games cast in the old school style started to fill up the shelves.
This is, like, just so long and so pointless. When are we gonna get to, like, Super Mario Brothers 3? When are we gonna get to it?
Almost a decade, excluding the Wario Land sub-franchise, and even those were releases had slowed to a crawl would be 2005 Super Princess Peach, which, as the title implies, took the long overdue step of having Princess Peach do the fighting herself to rescue.
I actually liked
Mario
Super
and
Princess
Luigi.
Peach.
Then, 1 year later,
Maybe I'm like the only person who liked it, but I actually did. Maybe because it was easy and I suck at platformers.
By Donkey Kong Country on the SNES, and bumped the character models up to their present-day incarnations, but otherwise represented the back-to-basics approach, a classic side-scroller model primarily on SMB1. Linear levels, mushroom flower star power-ups, though the mushrooms now came in extra small and significantly bigger varieties, and Bowser castles at the end of each level to conquer. And while it might not have blown the minds of longtime devotees, see below, it more than succeeded.
Yeah, I like Super Princess Peach was fine. I like some of the. I'm just not very good at the Mario games. Like, I have New Super Mario Brothers. I'm just not good at platformers.
When judged against the rest of the series, NSMB probably falls in the average zone. It's a solid game, how could it not be, with Nintendo EAD, the company's top-tier in-house development outfit, having had about 20 years to perfect the formula. But I'll admit to feeling a small tinge of that's it. Upon first playing through, it may have been an issue of expectations.
The part of him almost, the part about him almost committing suicide over finding out that Mario wasn't from Brooklyn is amazing.
That is me hoping for something that picked up where World and Yoshi's Island left off, whereas Nintendo was looking to polish up the original Diamond. But if you'd told me that this amusing, glossy revival game signaled the beginning of a full-fledged rebirth for Mario and Nintendo, I would have written it off as wishful thinking. I would have been wrong. Revolution, my reborn gaming habit, had been focused almost exclusively on handhelds, so I hadn't been paying much attention outside of work to the console scene. I knew the Xbox 360 and PS3 were en route and set to muck up the HD DVD Blu-ray war that was already making a
Wasn't this book called Brick by Brick? Wasn't this supposed to be a frame-by-frame analysis of Super Mario Brothers 3? We haven't gotten to it. He's just doing his life story. This is like a DSP video. Like in every DSP video, he always tells his entire life story, even when it's not important.
After we remote around the same time, we learned that the final system would be called the Nintendo Wii. It had become customary, routine even, for new game consoles to primarily...
Okay, I have a confession. I used to be a real Nintendo fanboy, so I used to say to people, "Long live the revolution," in response to the Wii. The Wii was very disappointing, although I love Twilight Princess.
Their numbers, size of onboard memory, speed of processor, size of chips and boards, etc. But the Wii came out touting unique features like consoles used to do back in the days of blast processing and triple buttons. Along with motion controls, Nintendo was touting the mini avatars of the
Okay, my issue with this is this feels so fake. This feels like your father, like your 50-year-old father who's never played a video game before, is like did a little research and is trying to write a fake memoir on like what he did during the 90s and 2000s. Like, this whole thing is just so contrived. Who talks like this? Who the fuck talks like this?
That could be inserted into games, and a virtual console for downloading older classic games. Both things considered routine now, but quietly revolutionary at the time. The mainstream of gaming culture, of course, turned up its noses. Silly gimmicks. Nintendo was weary and out of touch. They didn't know how to compete in the modern gaming market. The system itself was graphically underpowered, and the motion sensing gimmick was...
No, it was the Wii was shit.
How could it be anything else when the remote, resembling an Apple-esque version of an NES
the GameCube was a lot better,
was
I'm
so
sorry.
clearly not designed for the multiplayer, online first-person shooters that had become the only game genre that mattered over the previous half-decade. This was the consensus, expressed loudly in the gamer culture and in more muted tones in the gaming press. Of course, the story of not just how wrong but how spectacularly wrong the consensus turned out to be doesn't need to be rehashed here. Traditional game culture was skeptical and resistant to the Wii.
No, but the Wii was a failure.
Look at Wii Sports, essentially a pack-in game designed as a tech demo for motion controls. The system was an immediate, massive success. Stock flew from shelves, and customers lined up in droves. The sales numbers climbed so high so quickly it soon became a statistical impossibility that any other machine of that generation would end up selling better.
Yeah, I admit I waited in line with my father to buy the Wii and Twilight Princess.
captivating.
Honestly, I love Twilight
The rest
Princess
of
so
the
much, it was kind of
the
worth
movie
getting the
hadn't been
Wii
seen
just to
since,
play
well,
it.
since the debut of the NES 2 decades earlier. As much as hardcore gaming would continue to deny it, all of a sudden Nintendo was back, but not necessarily.
Skyward
the Nintendo
Sword was
villain.
like the most
Early
disappointing
on,
game
it
I'd
felt to me
ever
as though
played,
Nintendo
though.
wasn't just
We aren't
looking
going to
to
talk about
bypass what was then
Skyward
the
Sword.
mainstream of the gaming market to
Skyward
appeal to
Sword
a
was
broad
my
audience,
own
but also
personal
to bypass
Vietnam.
their own devout fanbase. Though it was a major attempt at rebranding, and part of that process seemed to be getting away from their known stature as primarily a delivery system for Mario, Pokemon, and Zelda titles. Wii Sports featured no licensed characters, and while the system did launch with some familiar faces ready to go in the form of Super Paper Mario and Zelda, Twilight Princess, the lack of a major Mario title stood out, particularly since the GameCube's Big Mario entry. Sunshine had been received as an admirable but not entirely successful experiment. Was that to be the end, then? Was Mario to go the way of Mickey Mouse, star of the company in name only? Mascot Odysee, relegated to cheerleading for the new stars from the sidelines.
I'm a huge GameCube fan.
Or their grandparents,
I did a video a while back where I showed off my games. I own most of the good games for GameCube. I don't have a couple of them. I don't have Eternal Darkness, Sanity's Requiem though. But it's like $1 billion to get that.
Fairly plausible to me, and filled me with a sense of impending ironic dread. Nintendo makes the big comeback I'd wanted for them, but wind up in a form that in no way resembled my memory of them. And with no Mario, it would, I imagined, fit my luck at that time. I was wrong. To the stars, one of the quirks that accompanies Shigeru Miyamoto's position as an elder statesman of game development is that he holds the prioritization of interface, read, gameplay, above any other aspect of the process. No matter how much graphics improve, or how much the industry, and the audience, comes to prize narrative or visual innovation, one gets the distinct sense that he generally doesn't want to do a game, even one star in
No, I don't know the answer to that question.
To try some new technique or fresh idea in the process. His penchant for canceling.
Bane Kato's 1 and 2, Tales of Symphonia, Mario Sunshine, which I didn't really like because I'm bad at it.
Spaceship combat title from his own honeymoon and told them to change the game's power-up mechanism to diving under arches and to make the lead character an anthropomorphic cartoon fox. His reasoning? He had just wed in a traditional Shinto ceremony, which involves passing beneath an arched walkway en route to standing before a statue of the fox-like god Amaterasu. The finished game, Star Fox, would become a bestseller and kick off yet another beloved franchise from Nintendo. In the time that the Wii was still only in the planning stages of becoming a console sales juggernaut.
Okay, the two most disappointing moments. Okay, the three most disappointing moments of my life. Okay, the third most disappointing was Command & Conquer 3, which we are going to talk about. The second was Command & Conquer 4, which I was expecting to be shit, but was still a disappointment. The most disappointing thing of my life was Skyward Sword. Skyward Sword was like the biggest disappointment in my life. Sunshine was good. I just am not good at it. That's kind of my my issue. It's like I don't dislike it. I'm just not good at it.
Miyamoto's new fancy was to create a 3D platformer where manipulating and negotiating shifting forces of gravity was the main obstacle to completing levels and solving puzzles. And so it was decided that Mario would now travel to outer space. The space-bound setting of Super Mario Galaxy may have started out as a way to visually and narratively explain Miyamoto's desire for gravity-fixated physics, but it turned out to be an ingenious way around what had become the nagging problem of platforming in 3D. The jump and dodge gameplay that had defined the majority of the Mario series existed because hurdles and chasms were the only forms of geographic obstacle one could place on a path that could only be traversed from left or right. But being able to move in all directions through fully realized
okay, when I put these together, I'm going to edit in a disclaimer at the front where he explains that this is not a history of Mario, this is not his life story, and this is not a history of Nintendo.
Science fiction than it was by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry's The Little Prince, with Mario traversing comically planetoids and hitching a ride on shooting stars. Galaxy allowed the series to evolve into a kind of absolute extreme version of the platforming ideal. Mario leaps from platform to platform above a literal black abyss on a path that is almost always fairly linear, even if such straightforwardness is cleverly hidden.
Okay, I can't take this. Okay, let's skip ahead until something happens. Okay. The Calling. What the fuck is The Calling?
The Calling in 2008, I was spending a lot of time online, re-engaged with a gaming community that in many ways not only didn't resemble the one I recall but seemed openly hostile to it, a mirror image that hated its own original subject. The feeling of inclusiveness that I remembered, perhaps in rose-colored exaggeration, born from gaming culture and nerd culture having originated as one and the same and thus sympathetic to misfits and the socially oppressed, had been replaced by a culture bullying, a crude, cruel horde dedicated to shunning not only the old iconography of gaming but any attempt to build a new one beyond the borders of the online multiplayer military shooter culture that had come to dominate. Whereas I'd recall the culture that flaunted its own pseudo-multiculturalism given the sheer volume of the medium that came from the alien culture of Japan, I now found a rabidly xenophobic culture that would not only happily purge the weird Eastern influences of the past but also resisted the injection of any perspective that didn't align with that of a heterosexual middle-class male. I was told, in feverish, excited terms, that gaming had matured.
Okay,
From my perspective,
people
it had
are
aged
talking
from
in
their
the
own
chat
business, the
about
show and, yes, occasionally childish
Skyward
innocence
Sword
of
being
gamer
open
culture I
world.
remembered had morphed into the persona of an
The
ignorant,
issue was it
horrible
wasn't.
fool,
I mean,
into
Wind
the
Waker
teenage
was
world,
actually
resentful of women,
sandbox.
fiercely protective of privilege, eager to
Sandbox
protect
was
the
like
human, utterly
completely
contemptible.
open world.
Of course, this culture despised the we.
Wind Waker
presenting
was
as if
great
the
though.
fusion of
I
all
love Wind
that they
Waker.
sought
People are
must
so
be
mean about
a
it.
group activity
So are we
with
going through the
cultivated
entire
detachment,
thing?
colorful
Yeah, I'm
and
going
exuberant
through the
where they
entire
craft
thing.
darkness and edginess, ended up dumping my frustrations with what the medium and its public face had become, crystallized by the reveal that the lead of the rebooting Bionic Commando franchise was to be transformed into yet another scowling, stubble-bearded look of a Wolverine knockoff, into a YouTube video about the declining standard of character design in games. I wound up titling it Game Over Thinker, Episode 1 a matter of character at the end when I got a vague sense that I wound up having more to say and could maybe turn this into a series.
This series was shit.
More episodes, which earned a tiny but loyal following on the tubes, but never did I entertain any series.
I actually don't think his movie
Angry
reviews
Nerd
are that
or the next
bad.
Yahtzee Crawshaw. Boy, that'd be cool though, huh? Thoughts on the
I
other
kind of
hand
like
were of course
MovieBob's
common,
movie
though I did
reviews,
fire
to
off
be
the, hey,
perfectly
look at
honest.
this. Link to the original to ScrewAttack.com, the Texas-based site that had famously discovered Rolf's AVGN series. Enough time went by that I honestly forgot that I'd even sent it until one day I noticed that the viewer numbers had exploded all at once on YouTube. ScrewAttack had posted the first
ScrewAttack is
episodes
so
to its
fucking
page,
lame, I
and
can't
suddenly
even
my
believe it.
YouTube channel,
Remember
my
game
and
trailers,
blog I set
anyone?
to
Remember
promote the
that
series with
amazing
inundated
stuff?
with new visitors. My videos were being posted to blogs and feeds across the web, and all at once the Game Over Thinker went from being one of my hobbies to being a thing I was now in charge of. Suddenly fame, even of a type I wasn't really able to monetize in any way, was quite a thing, but I could not have been prepared for what happened next. Out of the blue, I got an email from EscapistMagazine.com, the games journalism outfit that had discovered zero punctuation. They'd seen my stuff on YouTube. I'd started posting movie reviews as well, just for fun, and wanted me to do them. At first, I thought they'd be looking to pick up Game Over Thinker, but it turned out they were actually looking to expand their horizons. They wanted a film critic. Holy shit. After a few test runs to iron out the kinks, I officially joined the team as the Escapist movie critic, hosting my own series Escape to the Movies. In the exact same time period, ScrewAttack offered me the chance to enter Overthinker in an audience voting competition to
Does
become an
anybody
official part of
care about
Escape.
ScrewAttack?
I won, and the partnership
Has anyone
endures
cared
to this
about
day.
ScrewAttack
Both
for
of these
years?
developments could not have come at a better time. In my real work life, I'd finally surrendered to take on a soul-sucking data entry job. Grim irony, my assignment was to process the employee termination paperwork of various large corporations. That job didn't last. I was fired for, frankly, not being very good at it, and I segued off into another part-time retail job, working the cappuccino.
So this asshole got like a degree in film production. He sucked at school. MovieBob has talked about wanting to like carry out genetics programs to get rid of. He wants to carry out genetics programs to get rid of low IQ people, when he was a fucking disaster when he was in school, as he said earlier, and he got a degree in a useless subject, and he spent the last 10 years at this point in time working at Blockbuster and Best Buy, and now doing a shitty data entry job. Like, these are... like... Just trying to think how to describe it. These are things people should be doing in their early 20s maybe. This is what people should be doing before they get an actual career. This guy was making no efforts to get a career. He's just such a fucking loser.
The Borders books. But now I had a real career to build on the side and hopefully...
And I don't mean a loser because he wasn't successful, but because he never tried.
Game culture commentator. ScrewAttack even flew me down to Texas to speak at their big convention, along with web superstars like James AVGN Roll, Noah Spoony Antweiler, and Brent Offloss. Was this really happening? Peace in our time. I wasn't the only one going through the end of an era and signed an exciting new beginning. The so-called console wars that had in part created the once problematic identity which Nintendo had now re-embraced with thunderous success, the Disney of video...
Peace in our time. What the fuck? This guy is such a narcissistic douchebag. Explaining the so-called console wars that in part created the once problematic identity of which Nintendo has now re-embraced with thunderous success, the Disney of video games. However, their history witnessed the war managed to absolve. Like, he thinks it's literally his personal Vietnam.
Gamers, even fans who would have been too young or not have witnessed the war have managed to absorb, through pop cultural osmosis, the idea that for some reason Sonic the Hedgehog and the Super Mario Brothers were enemies, or, at the very least, they weren't friends. In 2007, this last cultural remnant of the console wars was put to rest. Gamers may have dreamed of seeing Mario and Sonic team up, or fight, in some kind of grand game devoted solely to that event, perhaps a mix and match of their respective game styles, but whatever anyone had in mind, few could have predicted the out-of-the-blue announcement in 2007 of a Mario-Sonic crossover in the
Okay,
form of an
who gave a
Olympic
shit about
Games
Mario
collection.
and Sonic
If
at the
nothing else,
Olympics?
Mario and Sonic
It was like
Games
the
was
lowest
average
of
game
below
its type.
cheap-ass
But however nifty and
cash-ins.
nifty was to see
I would
its
never
workers
look at
singing
that
together,
shit. It's
the game
obviously a
wasn't quite the
gimmick. It's
climax
not a
that
real
iconic
video
rivalry
game.
might have deserved in the eyes of many. That would come later. Now that's more like it. Nicely characterized.
The climax of an iconic rivalry might not have deserved.
And everyone else in Super Smash Bros. Brawl, the Wii installment of the mascot fighting game that had become one of Nintendo's biggest series in the GameCube era. In addition to its famous multiplayer mode, Brawl featured a single-player story mode that placed the game's roster of classic characters in a side-scrolling platformer adventure through what could only be called an orgy of...
I like the subspace emissary.
In the final moments of the game, when players face off against a mysterious final...
Didn't they not have a campaign mode in what was the new one even called? Is it just Super Smash Brothers? There's not even a thing at the end of it?
Space Emissary was close to a religious experience for me in general. Link meets Yoshi, our OB Storm...
Say that playing the Subspace Emissary was close to a religious experience for me in general. Link meets Yoshi, Rob Stormtroopers, Kirby blowing up Bowser and Ganondorf's giant space cannon would be to putting it mildly. But even after seeing Mario and Sonic together in a real game and to be able to fight one another, no less, felt more like real, genuine closure than it had any right to feel for a real grown man. What the fuck?
In the final moments of the game, when players face off against a mysterious final villain named Taboo, none other than Sonic the Hedgehog appears out of nowhere to mortally wound the enemy and unlock himself as a playable character and allow for the story to conclude. To say that playing through Subspace Emissary was close to a religious experience for me in general. Link meets Yoshi, our OB Stormtroopers, Kirby blowing up Bowser and Ganondorf's giant space cannon would be putting it mildly. But even after that, seeing Mario and Sonic together in a real game and able to fight one another, no less, felt more
like he has no insight. Like there's there's zero passion here. There's zero. Does this man sound like he was excited? Does this man sound like he gave a shit about this at all? This whole thing is just some fucking post-hoc story he wrote after the fact to try to make it look like his life was more exciting than it was. Like, there's no emotion here. There's no feeling here.
The rivalry of Mario and Sonic, one-time enemies of the Golden Age, now united as avatars of said age as it fights against its own fating and thus far keeps winning. The next level, and so we come to the present, or at least close enough. In 2000...
Oh my god. Thus at last the long rivalry of Mario and Sonic, one-time enemies of the Golden Age, now united as avatars of said age to fight against its own fate and thus far keep winning. The Golden Age to him is like the hardcore gaming season to DSP. The super extreme Golden Age hardcore gaming season. The next level.
The next level, and so at least close enough. In 2009, Nintendo released New Super Mario Bros. Wii, a console-sized update of the NSMB formula from handhelds with one key difference: 1 to 4 player cooperative multiplayer.
Well, he doesn't have any friends, so multiplayer doesn't matter.
Like a symbolic gesture, a fusion of the Wii's party gaming soul with Golden Age nostalgia, Nintendo and Mario's two audiences made one. Sure, there were some quibbles to be had. It's kind of lame that players 3 and 4 have to be a pair of palette swap Toads rather than the two princesses, or even Toad and Toadette. But it was a marked improvement over its DS predecessor in challenge and polish, and it featured the return of not only Yoshi but the Koopalings too.
Who the fuck are the
I enjoyed it.
Koopalings?
In fact, playing it got me through what felt very much like an intermittently over-stressful holiday season that you and I sort of figured that was that. Retro platformers, after all, were a niche genre, especially on consoles. But then everyone else bought it. Everyone. In a turn that I would love to have seen coming, NSMBWII turned out to be one of the biggest releases ever on the system. It wasn't just retro gamers and nostalgic fanboys buying it, it was kids, parents, families. The side-scrolling Super Mario Bros. Formula was as addictive as ever, and now its new multiplayer form had pulled a whole new generation, and their parents and grandparents, evidently, into the fold. All told, it sold well over 10 million units, becoming the fastest-selling single console game in history. After all this time, my old friend, and the form in which he was almost most comfortable, was still the gold standard. Deservedly so. In the wake of NSMBWII's success, the Mario merchandise market exploded in a way it never had when I was young enough to have justifiably gorged upon it. High-quality Mario toys are a common sight all over, and I won't pretend I don't have a few choices decorating...
Okay, that's actually the first interesting thing he said. Yeah, I notice nowadays if you want to get like a plushie or a statue or like Mario or Link or something, like you can get that now, but back in the day, getting any kind of like video game themed stuff at a major store was difficult.
My home right now. Oh, speaking of homes, as Mario was settling back onto his throne, things were turning around for me as well. My hard work for The Escapist and Screw Attack had started to pay off in numbers that allowed me to quit my retail work entirely and devote even more time to my criticism and video making. I'm now what's called an e-celebrity, of sorts, though
now it's an
still
lol
feels
kind of
strange to me.
sorts.
At any moment, I expect someone to leap from the shadows and cry that man is no professional commentator.
He is a
wrong.
fraud.
I speak on panels at PAX East. I went to Seattle for the Independent Game Developers Conference. I trekked to North Carolina for the Escapist Debut Expo. And I'm now making plans to head back to Texas for Screw Attack's Revived convention. I even made enough money, sustainably, to finally move out of my family's house into a place of my own. A life transition that spurred me to buckle down and write the playthrough portion of this book. So, it's not just a retrospective of Super Mario Bros. 3.
So this guy went to college for a useless degree, then he spent the next like 12 years doing minimum wage work in his parents' basement. Now, once again, I understand a lot. I understand more than like just about anybody else. It's really hard to get a job. It's really hard to get into the industry. It's hard to keep a job. It's hard to keep up with it. The modern workplace is a disaster. It's a dumpster fire. If Bob was having trouble, I can understand it could take that long. I don't think that was the case. I think he's a lazy fuck with no ambition or drive who just wanted to leech off of his parents.
Record of my last time playing it from start to finish in the home where I had played it for the first time. Moving into a home of my own, well, an in-law apartment in Revere, technically, was a mildly chaotic experience. Not in the least because Evangeline, Vange, my beloved last living grandparent, passed away only a few days before my move was scheduled. I was determined...
Who the fuck calls their grandmother Vag? That's fucking disgusting. If my grandparents ever called my wife Vag, I would fucking smack them.
Not to draw the process out, to get as much of my gear, particularly my bed and the video making equipment for what were by now 4 to 5 separate web shows, installed in the new place as possible on the first day, which ultimately led to a set of nice sleepless days worth of furniture assembly, shelf construction, equipment testing, and general new life building. Part of it meant frequently heading back home to dig out as many usable items as I could from my closets and drawers. I found a lot of subtly useful random items, extension cords, USB cables, twist ties, batteries, but also a lot of lost keepsakes to take with me because, well, you know, during one such plunge, I retrieved a set of large...
This dude literally just wrote a page of him building furniture. This is like a fucking DSP vlog in text form.
But not very heavy boxes, and felt a powerful sense of what they contained before opening a single one. But open them I did, and inside I found my childhood, the games, my games.
He never left his
everything that had survived from my
his
early days of
childhood.
gaming. Stacks of NES, some N64, and Dreamcast games, plus the corresponding consoles, controllers, and other equipment. At the very bottom, in true dramatic fashion, was my original NES, a little faded for the wear, but otherwise as immediately recognizable as the day I'd first hooked it up. In a separate
Isn't this supposed to be an analysis of Super Mario Brothers 3? Let me just look this book up while we're talking about
the
this.
magazine Odysee's publication for good came only a few months later. Issue number 1 now hangs, framed, on my wall. But the games I resolved immediately that those devices would live again, and immediately put the rest of my homemaking on hold while I set about doing just that. With the half-constructed skeletons of seemingly more important accoutrements of living leaned against walls, their construction on hold, I spent a night cleaning cartridges and connections with rubbing alcohol and Q-tips and a day teaching myself how to disassemble an NES to replace its connector pins.
Okay, I want to read the description for this. More than a strategy guide, bigger than a retrospective, a whole look at one of the greatest games of all time, film critic and game journalist Bob Chipman attempts the most in-depth analysis ever of his all-time favorite game, Super Mario Bros. 3. The book chronicles his own most recent journey through every step of the game, missteps and all, while analyzing every element of this enduring NES classic, from level design to visuals to music, to its unforgettable characters for their artistic, cultural, and even historical significance. He also details the history of the Super Mario franchise itself, his own experiences growing up gaming, and many of the life-changing events that surrounded and shaped this most recent quest to save the Mushroom Kingdom. This isn't the most recent game, but so it's like a second thing. I don't want to get like too angry at him if it's self-published, because I'll probably self-publish my book.
And other machines did not, thankfully, require that level of repair. I tested every game and, afterwards, played a copy of Super Mario Bros. 3 on my original NES, and just like that...
Okay, I want to take a vote in the chat. Do you guys want me to do this for My Twisted World?
HD follow-up to the Wii, once again based around a new type of...
Because My Twisted World is fucking amazing. I've read it before.
The system's launch, a major event, given that it's...
And no, there's no one to claim copyright on that because he shot himself, so I could literally just call it annotated read-through of it.
Of the gamut pad. Good game, even great in spots, but it's not the one they're using to sell the system in ads. No, the task has fallen to New Super Mario Bros. U, which is exactly what it sounds like it is. It's been over 25 years since the original Super Mario Bros. Turned the original Nintendo Entertainment System into a worldwide phenomenon that changed the history of entertainment and my life in particular, and 25 years later, a 2D Super Mario Bros. Side-scroller is carrying the banner for the new generation. Mario is still here, so am I. I'd like to think that, if possible, we would thank one another for that. Epilogue, believe it or not, the Wii U I purchased on launch day was defective. Not great news, but we deal with what we must. I decided that it would be faster to track down a new one than to send it for repairs, and spent the next few days showing up at electronics stores early in the morning hoping they'd been restocked. I eventually won out by joining up with a Black Friday line and, frankly, being...
So, this dude... So this dude bought a Wii U and it was defective, so he bought another Wii U. That's exactly what DSP did for the Switch.
Lucky. However, on one of the non-eventful days I had an encounter that stuck with me and probably will for a while. I was standing in the November cold outside of a local Target whose website had listed Wii U as being in stock. Having worked in retail for so long, I knew that could be misleading. More likely than not, they'd misscanned the pre-orders they were still holding for customers. This was only 2 days post-launch, as general stock. It turned out to be the case, incidentally, but it was still worth a shot. After about 20 minutes of waiting, I was joined by another pair of early birds, a young mother and her 2 children. One was a boy of about 6 or 8, and the other was a toddler whose gender was undeterminable as she was wrapped in a solid cocoon of winter wear and cradled against their mom's shoulder. I got the sense that we may have been there for the same thing, they're likely picking up a pre-order, me hoping there was stock beyond the pre-orders, and I could tell this despite the fact that we only said hello to one another, not by some psychic intuition, I stress, but because the boy was making it pretty clear, he was excitable to the point of bouncing, and his attire told the rest of the tale. Mario t-shirt, Mario baseball cap, Mario backpack, even Mario sneakers.
That's fucking parental abuse. They let them do this.
I looked down at him, smiled, nodded. He looked up at me, realizing, before I did, honestly, that I also happened to be wearing a Mario shirt, one from my era, SMB2 character select screen, to be precise, with a look of quizzical surprise. This big older guy knows Mario too?
This is
Yes,
so
I do.
fake.
Yes, I do.
He obviously
Suddenly,
made
I
this
felt
up.
better about the likelihood
There's
that
no
I would
way
find
that
a
this
reader of
actually
my own that
happened.
day. Part of the phantom stock waiting inside could well have been this kid's pre-order, and between me getting mine and him getting his, he can't have it. Mario belongs to him more than he belongs to me, even if I've known him longer, because Mario, in games, and
Mario's like the
play
fucking
fundamentally belong
will
more to
of
the young.
fire.
That's not to say they can't also be part of an adult life.
Like,
It's
Mario's the
simply to
will
say
of
that
fire
losers,
that's passed
and
from
I'm
one
for many
generation
reasons,
to another.
because of my parents,
Like, when
my
Asuma
grandparents,
dies
my
and he's
friends
like,
family, but also because of
Shikamaru,
Mario,
I
whose
give you my
adventures
will of
filled my long
fire.
hours,
I give
filled my
you
dreams,
the
gave me a
dreams and
consequential
wishes
sense of
of
stability,
those
and
who
I
came
never would have
before
expected
me,
led me
and I
on
ask you to
this
give them
round
to
up
my
my
son.
career and
Here's my
prosperity.
copy of
I
Super
wouldn't
Mario
dream of
Brothers
denying the kid
3.
to possibly have the same grand adventure, and I can only hope that Mario was as good a friend to him as he was to me. And so, in addition to writing this book for myself, for people like me, for game designers and...
Okay, fuck it. Let's just... Okay, here we are. We've made it to the actual fucking game. Okay, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sorry you had to suffer through this. So, we're gonna just fucking quick this shit. Okay, so here we're at the game. This is where it's gonna really get shitty.
Part 3. The game The Basics Super Mario Bros. 3 Inches was developed as a first-party by Nintendo EAD Entertainment, Analysis and Development with Shigeru Miyamoto and Takashi credited as its primary designers and Koji Kondo as the composer of its score.
Do you think if Miyamoto read this book, he would cry and just say my whole life was wasted so I gave birth to this? Yes, that would make Sonic
All
the
three
Hedgehog.
versions were originally published on game cartridges designed to interface with their respective consoles. The story from the original NES game manual, The Mushroom Kingdom has been a peaceful place thanks to the brave deeds of Mario and Luigi. The Mushroom Kingdom forms an entrance to the Mushroom World where all is not well. Bowser has sent his 7 children to make mischief as they please in the normally peaceful Mushroom World. They stole the magic wand.
I just had a thought. If you were going to do a video about reviewing Mario 3 brick by brick, wouldn't that be a Let's Play? Like, wouldn't you record the screen and like talk about it? Why would you write a book without pictures analyzing? I don't fucking know.
From each country in the Mushroom World and use them to turn their kings into animals. Mario and Luigi must recover the royal magic wands from Bowser's 7 kids to return the kings to their true forms. Goodbye and good luck, said the princess and Toad as Mario and Luigi set off on a journey deep into the Mushroom World. War and Peace it isn't, but just the basic storylines were par for the course in this era of gaming. Even still, it provides a bigger picture of the Mario universe than had previously been established. This is the first mention that the Mushroom Kingdom is only one part of a larger world, primarily, but it also establishes that the starting point this time around has not quite settled into the Peach always gets kidnapped groove it would in subsequent games. While the princess does indeed wind up abducted at the beginning of World 8, the main story of the game has her in the role of commander, dispatching the Mario brothers to the 7 kingdoms to deal with Bowser's assault. In fact, given that both sides of the conflict are delegating the warfighting to subordinates this time around, SMB3 marks the first clear delineation of the Troopa Mushroom conflict as a long-term military conflict rather than mere isolated attacks by Bowser. Left unmentioned in the written story but implicit in the game itself is that Bowser has amassed a mechanized military force for this particular engagement, outfitting his children with heavily armed airships and protecting his own kingdom with tanks, jets, and battleships. The characters, interestingly, the original manual for SMB3 refers to all sentient creatures in the game, including enemies, as characters. While you'll find a list of said enemy characters further ahead in this section, these are the players whose presence is vital to what exists of the game's narrative. Mario, assuming you haven't skipped ahead to this part, he should be rather familiar to you by now. The main character of the series, Mario, is a plumber, possibly native to Brooklyn, New York, who has traveled to and become a hero in the alternate universe of the Mushroom Kingdom. Depicted in the game, and elsewhere, as a husky-built Italian-American man with a large mustache, wearing a red hat and blue overalls over a red shirt. Luigi, Mario's brother. Luigi is depicted outside the games as being taller than Mario with a slimmer build but appears in the game proper as looking identical save for swapping green for red clothing choices. Princess Peach, also known as Princess Toadstool, the main, though, as of this game, no longer sole, female figure.
Okay, let me just go back. Sorry, I just kind of lost my my train of thought here. I was just looking at Fire Emblem Heroes. I'm sorry, I
The
cheated.
characters, interestingly,
This book's really
the original
boring.
manual for SMB3 refers to all sentient creatures in the game, including enemies, as characters. While you'll find a list of said enemy characters further ahead in this section, these are the players whose presence is vital to what exists of the game's narrative. Mario, assuming you haven't skipped
Well,
ahead
characters is just the easiest way to say it. I don't
to
know.
this part, he should be rather familiar to you by now. The main character of the series, Mario, is a plumber, possibly native to Brooklyn, New York, who has traveled to and become a hero in the alternate
Fucking
universe of the Mushroom
Brooklyn,
Kingdom,
New York.
depicted in the game, and elsewhere, as a husky-built Italian-American man with a large mustache, wearing a red hat and blue overalls over a red shirt. Luigi, Mario's brother. Luigi is depicted outside the games as being taller than Mario with a slimmer build, but appears in the game proper as looking identical save for swapping green for red clothing choices. Princess Peach, also known as Princess Toadstool, the main, though, as of this game, no longer sole, female figure of the Mario franchise. Peach is the ostensible ruler of the Mushroom Kingdom. Depicted in outside game media as sporting long orange hair, she here appears as a brunette in SMB3 owing to the reuse of a sprite from the second game. Prior to 1997's Super Mario 64, Western translations referred to her surname as Toadstool. Toad, Princess Peach's perennial assistant sidekick. Toad is taken to be typical in appearance to the other mushroom people populating the kingdom. In SMB3, such figures appear multiple times throughout the game, though it's not made 100% clear if each appearance is meant to be Toad himself or multiple mushroom persons. Bowser, the principal antagonist of the Mario franchise. Bowser is the leader of a race of antagonistic turtle-like creatures called Koopas, apparently at perpetual war with the Mushroom Kingdom and Princess Peach in particular. Bowser is larger than the rest of his species, with bull-like horns, a mane of red hair and a spike-covered shell. Though he doesn't display propensity for it in this game, he and his children are described elsewhere as magic users in addition to a natural ability for breathing fire. The Koopalings, Bowser 7, later 8, children, mother officially unknown. They bear familial resemblance to their father but have distinguishing features, primarily in the area of hair color and clothing jewelry. Full descriptions of each are included here as part of the playthrough section proper, but their names, Larry, Lemmy, Iggy, Roy, Morton, Ludwig, and Wendy O, are predominantly puns on the names of famous musicians and or celebrities. Version specifics for the purposes of writing this book. The version of the game played was a port of the original NES version downloaded to a Nintendo Wii through the Virtual Console download service. It provides a version identical in graphics and programming to the original NES release, save for the fact that the Wii can be switched off and the game resumed later so long as you exit the game in progress before turning the system off. Otherwise, it is a faithful port of the game's original 1990 US release, played using a Wii remote turned on its side, a style which effectively mimics the basic setup of an NES controller. Basic visual terminology: SMB3 is an 8-bit game, which refers to the programming and space limitations available to the programmers in terms of graphics and sound. The NES and its games were designed to output audio and visuals primarily to the standard definition analog television sets of the day, circa 1989. The game's screen was a grid made up of tiny single-color squares called pixels, which were used to render all of the visual elements in the game. All individual elements and objects made from said pixels are technically called sprites, though, for purposes of clarity, non-moving or non-interactive elements are sometimes referred to separately as scenery or backdrops. Basic game terminology: the sprite controlled by the player, Mario in the context
Is
of the
this
single-player analysis, Mario or Luigi.
Mario the sprite controlled by the player, Mario in the context of this single player analysis, though for purposes of this writing may alternatively be referred to Mario or as a personification of the player author himself. Sprites representing, oh my god, who writes like
is
this?
typically called the player. Those for purposes of this writing may alternately be referred to as Mario, or as a personification of the player author himself. Read, me. Sprites representing creatures meant to serve as living obstacles to the player achieving his goals are enemies. Sprites representing objects that are useful or beneficial to Mario once acquired are called items, while items that cause a beneficial physical change in Mario are separately designated power-ups. Layout: the game is divided into 8 worlds, each containing a set of numbered levels.
Why does he
and
have to tell us
destinations.
this?
Each world is named either for its dominant geographic or aesthetic feature. The names of each world differ from version to version. Here the names associated with the original NES release are used, while each level is identified by the number of its world and then its own numerical designation.
Why does he have
For
to,
example,
like,
level
people
4
aren't
world 3 is
retarded.
called
They
level
can
4-3
probably, even if they
inches.
haven't played
For
the game, they
purposes of
probably
this playthrough,
understand this.
destinations which are
Or
not
just
specifically
explain this
named
as you're
levels are
going. I
referred
mean,
to by
this
the number of
stuff
the
isn't
level and said
rocket
destination's
science.
actual identity. For example, Level 2, Fortress. Game mode: Super Mario Bros. 3 inches has 3 separate modes of play and or interaction. The main
And our
is the actual
interaction?
playing of the levels. See gameplay below. And the secondary mode is the map screen, an overhead map of levels and other destinations viewed from overhead that the player uses to navigate from one point to the next. The third, battle mode, is accessible only in a two-player game and is a recreation of the original Mario Brothers game. Occurs whenever the two players occupy the same spot on the map screen and decides which player will take the next turn. The third, battle mode, is accessible only in a two-player game and is a recreation of the original Mario Brothers game. It occurs whenever one of the players chooses to stop on the other player's spot on the map screen instead of choosing a normal level. Battle mode allows the players to steal mushroom, flower, and star cards from each other, which are acquired from beating levels. The winner of the match gets the next turn. Gameplay, levels, SMB3's primary gameplay builds on the foundation set down by the original.
Okay, I'd like to ask the chat something. It's nice that I have the chat in the video so people can like know what I'm referring to. So, I'm just sorry. I'm just having trouble trying to think of how to like even describe this bullshit. Is it understandable that I'm kind of confused by what he's talking about? I don't know. Let's see here. Let me just scroll ahead. No, this is too good. We have to keep reading
The
this.
very bottom of the game screen is occupied by the status bar, which displays the following information clockwise starting from the top left. The number of the current world, the speed meter, also known as P meter, the number of coins collected, the time remaining of the current play session, the total score, and the remaining number of lives. All interaction is based on the control of Mario or Luigi by the player using an NES controller. Note, in the case of this writing, the game was played using a Wii remote, which is fundamentally analogous
We
to a
know.
NES
You've said that
controller.
multiple
When using
times.
said controller, S, the cross-shaped D-pad controller's horizontal, vertical, and, where applicable, diagonal movement, while the A button, 2 on a Wii remote, allows the player to jump. The B button, 1 on a Wii remote, is multifunctional. Holding it down while the right makes Mario run rather
No,
than
like you can literally
grab certain items
give,
and stun enemies.
like,
Primarily through the
it's
button
designed for the mass market. You can
to
give
shells
like
and carry
a
them.
3-year-old
In addition,
an
the
like an
N64
NES controller and they'll
projectors
figure
will
it
have
out.
a fire Mario
They'll
or
suck at
Mario.
it,
Holding the down button will
but-
let Mario crouch when in his big or super form and is also used to enter pipes, while up is tapped to enter doors. Additionally, the A button is used for swimming, except when using a frog suit, whenever Mario becomes submerged in water above his head, and for flying while using the Raccoon Mario or Tanuki suit power-ups. Within each level, Mario begins, in whichever form he entered from the map screen, with a set amount of time to reach the goal at the end, which is represented by a space of black backdrop. Said goal also contains a block that displays rapidly rotating cards of either a flower, mushroom, or star icon. If Mario collects a matching set of 3 cards, he is rewarded with a fireworks display and a set of extra lives, 1-ups, which we'll get to in a moment. While traveling through levels, the objective is to reach the goal without being killed and sent back to the map screen. Such deaths coming from collision with an enemy projectile, lethal hazard, spikes, lava, or falling into a pit. Death is instant from hits while Mario is in his standard or small form, while most hits taken while super or otherwise.
This
powered up will simply
dude
revert you to the
spent
next powerful
hours,
form. Lava
days,
and
weeks,
however,
months
earth and killers no
writing
matter
this
what
piece
form
of
you are in.
shit.
Items found inside blocks within
Like,
levels are exclusively
how
of the
can
power
you
of
explain
variety.
that to
If
someone?
Mario in his small form, the
Like,
power-up will
how
always be a
can
mushroom burst.
you
While
imagine like
contents on
telling
blocks otherwise
somebody
are fixed to block program to house
that-
a flower will always house a flower, unless it is
I don't
found by
even
small
know.
Mario, in which case it will yield a mushroom. The exception to this rule is the Starman power-up, which can be used by either Small or Super Mario and
The
will occupy
Starman?
designated block
I've never heard
areas.
that title
Also,
for it
some
before.
levels feature blocks which will produce a Starman only when struck by Mario when he
A
is already
Starman?
using
What the
previous
fuck is a
Items
Starman?
found inside treasure chests, whether encountered in levels or otherwise, are sent to the player's map screen item inventory. See below. Gameplay, map screen. The layout of each world and its levels are represented by a map screen, which presents said world in a stylized overhead view of its terrain. Each area, level, and/or scenario that can be entered is represented on the map by an icon, which typically disappear or change shape when they have been explored, used, or cleared. These icons are connected by set paths, the arrangement of which governs the whole of the player's movement on the map.
Calling this a
Level
suicide
panels,
letter
see below. It
or
can
a
be their
crime?
name or a logo when conquered, depending on the level. The status bar remains at the bottom, but pressing the button
Okay.
causes the bar to
I
move forward
can't.
into an inventory that stores items and power-ups retrieved from treasure chests.
I can't.
Unlike games of chance, or copies
Skip
of the
ahead to the
inventory,
analysis.
the
But
player
no,
utilize items
we
on the
have to
screen
let
itself or
Stam
themselves for
describe
power-ups
this.
before heading into a level.
We
Most
have
screen
to
elements
endure
are
this
ship, airship
nonsense.
levels. The final level of each of the first 7 worlds start automatically after Mario visits a castle. If he fails to bring the ship down on the first attempt, an icon representing it will become visible on the map and fly to a different location. For each attempt until it is conquered. If it retreats to a path blocked by a previously undefeated level, said level must be beaten first.
Oh my god, boulder, large lumpy rocks. He puts in an explanation. Okay, I can't take this. Okay, I think we get the idea. Let's go down to the analysis. Oh my god, items. Fire flower. Lakidu's cloud. Super leaf. Bricks? Okay, we'll go here. What does he say about blocks and
Blocks,
bricks?
while the terrain and background designs from SMB2 onward are often rendered to disguise this fact. The level layout of the Super Mario Bros. Side-scrollers essentially takes the form of a loose grid, with almost all interactive sprites being measurable in terms of blocks, which are used as the building materials of almost every structure in the game save for the ground terrain. While some blocks are found sitting on the ground, the majority hover in midair. In addition, blocks will often be invisible until struck from below. Whereas the first SMB built its world from only a handful of blocks, SMB3 introduced the greatest variety seen in the series to that point. This game is also the first to allow Mario to directly strike blocks from the side by using...
No, we haven't gone to
Donkey
the
Kong
analysis
attacks.
yet.
Bricks, also called brick blocks. In many ways,
Okay, no, let me just skip ahead to the actual analysis. Okay, let's see here. Look at this. Look at this. He goes through every type of block. Every type of enemies. Okay, okay, let me just see if I can get to the actual game. Koopa Troopa, Bowser's front, Koopa Paratroopa, Kurubi's shoe, Lava Lotus, Nipper. Here we go. Super Mario Bros. 3. Here's his actual analysis. We're actually going to get into brick by brick.
Moves, but varieties that are unmoored from a single path or space were not seen until Super Mario 64. Venus Fire Trap, a subspecies of piranha plant that spits fireballs, generally at an angle. Part 4, Super Mario Bros. 3 beginning to end. And so, here we are, the main event of this book, my complete, comprehensive, level by level, brick by brick playthrough of Super Mario Bros. 3. Conducted and chronicled over a period of 3 months, primarily in the evening, between April and June of 2012. Given that video games are, above all else, an interactive medium, both the dates and where worthy of mention.
Is this like an episode of Law and Order? This case takes place between the hours of between January 19th and January 25th.
I have no great artistic rationale for why I choose to begin writing up my playthrough tonight. Morning, technically, as it's 2:30 a.m. at present, but I have never been able to accept darkness and nighttime as none being one and the same. I am here, that is to say, my bedroom where the Wii is kept, because the wind and rain outside have inspired our family dog, Sprocket, to behave in the manner one expects of a dog during such weather, rendering work conditions untenable in my usual office, also known as the living room after everyone
Oh
else
my
is asleep.
god, he has
And
an
so,
office
my
like
thinking-
DSP has an office. So, even... How thick is this book? This book is 200 pages. This book is 200 pages. It just
Yes,
feels like
if I'm to
more.
move my workspace to my room anyway, it's as good a time as any to stop procrastinating on this Super Mario Bros. 3 inches project. Thus, here I am. Here we are. Pathetic excuse for an air conditioner rattling in the background. Bedtime cocktail of Jack Daniels. Captain Morgan and Schweppes at my side. Room lit only by the glows from the television and from my laptop. So, we begin.
That is literally the most depressing sight ever. This fucking, like, 35-year-old man-child playing Super Mario Brothers 3 in his parents' house, in his office, in their living room, which he calls an office. So he's sitting there drinking in his parents' basement with soda covering the thing. Like, look, even when we get to the fucking game, there's still just like a page of him bitching about the air conditioner.
Mario Bros. 3's title screen opens with a silent animation, utilizing sprites from the game, and contains a plethora of visual details as subtle clues to the game to come. We see Mario and Luigi, reverted once more to red and green palette swap copies of one another after having appeared as unique sprites in Super Mario Bros. 2 Inches, a set of enemy object sprites from the game, and our first glimpse at the new mechanics of shell grabbing and flight via the raccoon powers granted by the leaf. The title screen also introduces the odd stagecraft motif that recurs throughout the game, the graphics suggesting that the game's action is taking place as a kind of theatrical production. The animation is preceded by a huge red curtain being raised, and the oddly textured fauna in the background casts a solid black shadow on a cream-colored sky backdrop. The glowing number 3 casts a shadow too, in the shape of the all-important Tanuki, as though we were looking not at a video game abstraction of a natural world but at theatrical scenery. Mario even exits the sequence by pausing to dash behind an object, a skill, which is itself a clue to one of the game's more important secrets. World 1, Grassland.
What the fuck? Exits the sequence by pausing to dash behind an object. The shape of...
World 1, Grassland SMV3 is the first Mario game to feature a world map, with all levels and paths laid out in overview. The map's theme music is a jaunty little toe tapper, the easygoing jam-style music that was the
jaunty little toe
NES Mario
tapper.
titles. Appropriately, the anthropomorphic bushes dotting the landscape dance in time to it. 6 levels are visible, at the time a surprising break from the 3 levels and a boss level structure of previous games in the series, plus 2 mushroom houses, a spade panel, a hammer brother on patrol, and 2 castles. One small and located at midday, the other large and highlighted by a comic strip word balloon calling for help. From the game's instruction booklet, we have already been informed the scenario. Bowser's 7 evil children, the Koopalings, have stolen magic wands from 7 kings of 7 kingdoms, and we are to retrieve them. Clearly, that larger castle belongs to said king, and is our destination level 1-1. The first level of a Mario game is traditionally designed to teach you by trial and error how the rest of the game is to be played. Shigeru Miyamoto is said to have postponed the design of the first game's level 1-1 until the team built the rest of them, so they would know what skills it needed to impart, and to highlight what new has come to pass since last you visited the Mushroom Kingdom.
Okay, that was like the first interesting piece of information. That is actually kind of interesting that they did the tutorial stage last. That makes sense, though.
You then encounter 4 question blocks. The 4th contains the mushroom to become Super, or Big Mario, and get your first glimpse at a new variation on a classic enemy. A piranha plant that spits fireballs? Madness. Actually, it's called a Venus fire trap. Our introduction to SMB3's recurring penchant for puns. You also encounter your first chance to try a new form of enemy-object interaction, picking up the shell of the first Koopa Troopa you encounter and using it to whack a question block situated on the ground, the first instance of such block placement in the series history. Providing you are still Big Mario at this point, the block will yield a super leaf, and you will become the iconic Raccoon Mario for the first time. The tail of the tail. The English translations of the game call this form Raccoon Mario, but in the original Japanese the tail and ears are specified as those of a tanuki, a raccoon-like animal, also called a raccoon dog, common in Japan and significant to Shinto folklore. We'll discuss them in more detail when we come to a different power-up that the English translation does preserve as the tanuki suit. Raccoon Mario marks the first time a Mario power-up fundamentally changed the way a player interacts with the game world, as opposed to simply granting projectiles like the Fire Flower or invincibility like Starman. You now have a close-range attack, smacking the enemy with your tail, and can flap said tail to slow your descent after a jump. And, of course, you can fly, an action which the game's ingeniously subtle level design encourages you to try.
Ingeniously subtle level design. I thought we were past the, didn't we already have a whole, like, chapter where he described all this shit? Why are we talking about it again?
I still remember what a thrill it was to pull it off the first time. The game brilliantly understanding how much more satisfying it is having to get a running start to execute the move. You'll find hovering blocks, smiling clouds and a 1-up, extra life for your trouble. Back down below, the familiar paratroopers, wing troopers, make their return to the series, and after traversing a pair of pits and 2 more plant-inhabiting pipes you come upon a stack of bricks that, when struck by a well-tossed shell, produce a P-switch, red, big blue button, which, when pressed, briefly transforms all bricks in the area into coins. An effect which will form the basis of more elaborate puzzles in levels to come. A few more jumps, a few more enemies, and the level.
I thought this was brick by brick. What? I want to know how he made those jumps. I want to talk. Who are the other enemies?
Bowser's minions have developed new strains since
I
last
want to
we
know.
saw them, and that the ability to fly under the right circumstances means that the sky beyond the visible screen may hold secrets of its own. The level itself holds quick sonic secrets as well. The stage motif from the title screen is here repeated, with the large colored blocks casting shadows and seemingly bolted the backdrop, and the jarring transition into a stark black shadow space to mark the end goal. You may also take note of the lone white platform among the other more colorful examples. Should you choose to crouch down on it for a few seconds, Mario will actually fall into the backdrop and be able to move behind the scenery, a graphical trick glimpsed on the intro and soon to become quite vital level 1 to 2 back when this game was new. The first big surprise about 1 to 2 was that it had different music than 1-1. Traditionally, Mario games had only 3 or 4 main themes: Overworld, Underworld, Boss, Final Boss. SMB1 also had an underwater theme. Commonplace today, to be sure, but in 1989 a tantalizing glimpse at just how far SMB3 was going to push the NES's hardware in the pursuit of variety for its own sake. This is also the first appearance of inclined planes in the series, the first time Mario walks up or down a sloped hill as opposed to hopping up blocks arranged as steps. Should you attempt to crouch on a particularly steep slope, one is immediately provided. Following a Goomba producing horizontal pipe, Mario will slide down the hill on his bum, the visual effect of which still induces me to smile to this day. This, I think, is the secret to the character's enduring appeal, especially to each new generation of children. The sneaky sense that Mario's adventures, however perilous, are as much a game to him as they are to you. Incidentally, if you've kept or reacquired your raccoon tail here, the second of the Goomba producing pipes is your first big chance to pull off the classic Mario Infinite one-up trick by jumping on enemies one after another without touching the ground in between. The points awarded increase with each kill until they begin to automatically award an extra life. Using the endless supply of Goombas, proper timing in the raccoon tail to slow your descent, it's possible to rack up nearly limitless one-ups here, and you will need them. Over the next rise,
George R. R. Martin writing a Let's Play of Dark Souls with more sex and food actually sounds much better than this.
A row of coins placed curiously adjacent to it. Directly below, 2 bricks. Does one brick contain a P-switch? It does. Might the P-switch turn coins to bricks as it previously turned bricks to coins, thus creating a platform by which to reach the pipe? It might indeed, or, if able, you can just fly up there. Among the greatest virtues of SMB3 is that there is seldom only one way to solve the puzzle.
It's like Mass Effect. It's brilliant.
And our reintroduction to a remixed version of the
greatest game ever
from SMB1. Beyond that, your first chance to try out the music blocks, white boxes adorned with musical notes which bounds like springboard when landed upon and can add them to your jump. Beyond that, victory. The road diverges. The completion of level 1 to 2 reveals another series redefining moment for Mario history.
No, I'm playing with my water bottle. I'm not cleaning dishes.
Apart from warp zones, the games had always progressed with rigid linearity. Now, here, the world map offers multiple paths. You can go to level 1 to 3 or level 1 to 4, both of which are effectively blocking your path to the first of those mushroom houses. You can even go right down to that strange spade marker on your way to wait. What's this? You can just go right into that fortress. What new devilry is at work here? I'm trying in vain to recall what my choice was when I first played the game those many years ago. What sort of child had I been? Cautious and linear-minded enough to insist on going ahead to 1 to 3? Daring enough to defy the gods of numerical sequence and skip to 1 to 4? Or did I summon the nice suicidal bravery to march straight into the fortress?
The suicidal bravery to fucking listen to this bullshit.
The clear choice is to go to 1-3, but I'd like to think the Bob of 1989, flush with the thrill of the game in and of itself, thought to make the bolder choice. Level 1-3 1 to 3 is a strange looking level, especially if you take flight and discover an essentially empty yet vast and traversable sky. It's also short and flat, with only one new enemy, a boomerang brother, which means that unless the wandering hammer brother from the map screen made his way into your path already, you'll be encountering this new mutation before the classic variety, and only one new.
No, I've been deleting pages.
With wooden blocks will
no, like keep. I've been deleting pages as we go, so we're like a lot further than that. Like, yeah. So, this is Natural Reader. So yeah, don't worry, we're a lot further than that. Let's see here. Oh my god, is he actually gonna like give a day-by-day update? Let's look at this.
Tuesday, April 24th, 2012, it's 4 a.m. I should be asleep. The better to wake at a reasonable hour and get day work out of the way. I did a 3,000 calories routine at the gym today thanks to the welcome distraction of a DVD full of old Transformers cartoons. And it felt good enough. I'd like to repeat the process today if more vital commitments can be dispensed with in a timely fashion. But it felt like I'd be getting off on the wrong foot for there to be a day-long gap in this project right off the bat. Also, I really did want to get back in and play through at least level 1 to 4. Good video games are addictive like that, and good Mario games are practically crystal meth in that regard. So yes, one more level. Just one more level before bed. I try not to imagine I'm 8 years old again, begging that same question of my mother as I now beg it of myself. Games within games. The Mushroom House now open to me. I choose to enter there before my next official level. This is the first shop mechanic in a Mario game, though it reigns more like a game of chance. Toad presents me with 3 treasure chests, and I can only pick one. My prize is a mushroom, which goes down into an inventory menu you can use to save items and juice yourself up before heading into a level, a feature I'd like to see make a full comeback in the modern iterations of the series. My appetite for gambling now whet, I ought to pop down into the spade panel, another game of chance, before the level. The cartoon renderings of Mario and Toad here are an amusing reminder of how straight-up fat Mario used to be rendered. The modern Mario was round-bodied in a Mickey Mouse sort of way, but 80s Mario was visibly obese. The game is a horizontal slot machine, your goal being to form a complete picture of either a star man, mushroom, or flower for 1-ups. I get 2 pieces of the star before blowing it on the bottom row. I tell myself it's the screwdriver I've been nursing, as opposed to the loss of my gaming reflexes with age level 1 to 4. Another level, another Mario history first, an auto-scrolling level. As though traversing a series of sky-bound platforms beset by enemies wasn't maddening enough, the screen continuously moves from right to left on its own, forcing you to move at a pace that once upon a time felt unnaturally hurried for a Mario game. Previously, your only incentive not to lollygag was traditionally the time clock. I remembering perishing right away here on my first try back in '89, having not yet realized that the non-stationary wooden long blocks drop away when you jumped on them. I remember there's a 1-up in the first blocks you can hit from beneath but failed to acquire it. Blame the booze.
Okay, I am gonna do like I'm gonna do a bunch more videos on MovieBob. I just wanted to take a look at his book and see if it's as bad as I thought. Okay, this is unfucking bearable. He did it though. He delivered. He did do a brick by brick analysis. Oh my god, like
It's just one of them this time, the classic mallet-tossing variety, and his defeat earns me a Starman as a prize. Wednesday, April 25th, another late night, another long day. Vovo, my grandmother on my father's side, was hospitalized again yesterday. An ongoing, although, I am assured, not at this point serious problem that has almost become routine, though not enough to keep me from feeling uncertain. It's not lost on me that I'm currently coping with this and other uneasy aspects of my life in precisely the same way I did as a child, playing a video game. Playing this video game. Level 1 to 5. The entry into this level never fails to make me smile, while every other level of a Mario game up to this point, save the famous mid-air fall cold open from Super Mario Bros. 2, has opened with Mario's feet planted squarely on terra firma. When 1 to 5 opens, I find myself sliding down the cliff into a cave, coming to rest at the lip of a subterranean pool and plowing through 4 buzzy beetles, smooth-shelled, fireproof turtle-like foes that have been with the series from the beginning. As I go, it's a fun pace, and once upon a time I was blown away that Mario began to swim upon sliding into that pool rather than dying instantly, which is what hitting water in anything other than a designated swimming level.
Okay, fuck it. I'm gonna go ahead. This is unbearable. Oh my god. Okay, so I don't know if I really want to continue this. I have to go to bed because I have like a serious adult job I work. But you know what? I don't think it's... How much is left in this book? I don't think there's that much left. I think there's only like 100 pages. Okay, yeah, there's only like 140 pages left. Anyways, so we have about 150 pages of this bullshit left. I am probably gonna have to stop. I will be skipping ahead at some point. We aren't actually gonna go through all 150 pages. This is too fucking boring for anyone to get through the whole thing. This book is a cry for help. Archie, look in Bob's Overthinker series. Okay, we're going to be doing more on Bob. We're going to be doing his political views, his background, etc. This was just such a freak show. This was just so weird. I had to do this book. That and its easy quality content. So we're on level 3.
Level 1-312 is a strange-looking level, especially if you take flight and discover an essentially empty yet vast and traversable sky. It's also short and flat, with only one new enemy, a boomerang brother, which means that unless the wandering hammer brother from the map screen made his way into your path already, you'll be encountering this new mutation before the classic variety, and only one new skill to impart, namely that colliding with wooden blocks will sometimes yield a power-up, or annoyingly bounce you backwards into a pit, one or the other. But this is a Mario game, which means that humanity is your
I found a really
secrets.
good video talking, it's called What's Wrong with MovieBob, or what the hell's up with MovieBob. So I'm going to ask the creator of that if I can use that. Because in it he goes over like all of MovieBob's like background, all of his political views, and he kind of gathered it all together. And going through this shit, finding out like people's backstory, going through tweets and that kind of thing is really difficult.
In which flying even higher yields 1-up. And the third is a literal game changer. You will find, shortly before the exit, another plain white platform looking curiously out.
Wouldn't this be better if there was pictures for this, and not describing a game that a lot of people probably haven't played?
Perennial supporting player Toad. He's also the guy waiting for you in those mushroom houses on the map. We'll give you a magic whistle. The way of the whistle. The whistles of SMB3 are clearly actually recorders, also known as fibble flutes, likely another relic of the Japanese to English translation issues that so never games of the Golden Age. And their appearance here is a tiny yet era-redefining moment in the development of the Nintendo Corporation's public identity. If you use...
Oh my god. Okay, I gotta copy and paste this and put this in the description. That is amazing. Well, now we're actually getting through this book. Okay, so the way of the whistle of SMB3 are clearly actually recorders. That doesn't make grammatical sense. Shouldn't it be the whistles of SMB3 are actually recorders? I don't know, none of this makes any sense. AKA fipple flutes. Okay, let's see here. Their appearance here is a tiny yet era-redefining moment in the development of the Nintendo Corporation's public identity. Okay. Redefining.
The whistles of SMB3 are clearly actually recorders, also known as fibble flutes, likely another relic of the Japanese to English translation issues that so memorably plagued video games of the Golden Age.
Yeah, because I know that was an issue in some of the Castlevania games, because like there's Yoko Belnades, and Yoko Belnades is clearly an Aryan goddess, but she has a Japanese first name for some reason, which is probably just, yeah, and so does Alucard.
Famous Nintendo franchise after Mario himself. It's the first time outside of reused sprites or sound effects that a Nintendo game has made explicit, intentional reference to another video game and thus its own identity as a game. Comic self-awareness, a trait which would soon become central to certain iterations of the Mario franchise. Here enter the series.
What the fuck? And thus, the second... Okay, it's the first time outside of reused sprites or sound effects that a Nintendo game has made explicit intentional references to another video game and thus its own identity as a game. Comic self-awareness, a trait which would soon become central to certain iterations of the Mario franchise. Here entered the series for the first time. What the fuck is that? Oh my god. I don't even know what that means. Oh, just reading into stuff too much.
Central to certain iterations of the Mario Here enter the series for the very first time. The whirlwind deposits you on an island-bound warp zone, a set of pipes allowing you skip ahead by whole worlds. Using a whistle on World 1 will let you go to Worlds 2, 3, and 4. Using it on any world after that will open the path to the pipes for 5, 6, and 7. Using it in World 7 will take you to World 8 unless you have a spare. Using a second warp whistle while already at the warp zone will skip you all the way to the final level. And since there are 2 whistles to be found in World 1, the second one is in the fortress, a third is found in World 2, it is wholly possible to skip directly to the end after completing only 3 levels. I actually debated leaving the detail out. I couldn't, since this is supposed to be a comprehensive overview, and also since every other
I debated leaving that detail out. Literally every block in the game. He called this game block by block. I still can't believe I'm reading this. People in the chat, can you believe that somebody wrote a 250-page book that's literally every jump in Mario 3?
I was a subscriber to see if it had been published. Me being too young at the time to appreciate the difference between an exploitable glitch and a secret that the company who made the game would have to have known about, and showing it off to anyone who had a copy of the game like a magic trick or some great feat of strength. Tuesday, April 24th, 2012, it's 4 a.m. I should be asleep. The better to wake at a reasonable hour and get day work out of the way. I did a 3,000 calories.
No fucking no way he did 3,000 calories.
Transformers cartoons, and it felt good enough. I'd like to repeat the process today if more vital commitments can be dispensed within a timely fashion. But it felt like I'd be getting off on the wrong foot for there to be a day-long gap in this project right off the bat. Also, I really want to get back in and play through at least level 1 to 4. Good video games are addictive. Mario games are practically crystal meth in that regard. So yes, one more level. Just one more level before bed. I try not to imagine I'm 8 years old again, begging that same question.
A 3,000 calorie, I'm trying to think like how long that would take. A 1,000 calorie workout takes me, what, like an hour and 20 minutes, an hour and a half? That would be like 4 or 5 hours.
With 3 treasure chests, and I can only pick one. My prize is a mushroom, which goes down into an inventory menu you can use to save items.
Games within games. Oh no, you don't. You don't bring Dune into this piece of shit. Don't make a Dune reference. Don't make a Dune reference. This is... Okay, once again, I'm going to post a link to the chat of, like, if you want a good version of this book, like a book that's actually really good, that covers pretty much the same stuff but does it in an infinitely better way, I recommend Super Mario: How Nintendo Conquered America, which is a complete history of Nintendo. And it's I listened to the audiobook. It was really good. It talks about like all the stuff MovieBob did, the history of Nintendo to the present. And it was so much better than this shitty MovieBob book.
See, make a full comeback in the modern iterations of the series. My appetite for gambling now wet, I ought to pop down into the Spade panel, another game of chance.
And I'm someone who likes excessively detailed analysis. I've spent hours reading A Song of Ice and Fire forums, listening to fan theories. I've spent a lot, like Star Wars, Star Trek, all that stuff. I've watched a lot of stuff on that. But that's like interesting.
I tell myself it's the screwdriver I've been nursing, as opposed to the loss of my gaming reflexes with age level 1 to 4 another level, another Mario history first, an auto-scrolling level. As though traversing a series of skybound platforms beset by enemies wasn't maddening enough, the screen continuously moves from right to left on its own, forcing you to move at a pace that once upon a time felt unnaturally hurried for a Mario game. Previously, your only incentive not to lollygag was traditionally the time clock. I remembering perishing right away here on my first try back in '89, having not yet realized that the non-stationary wooden long blocks trapped away.
I mean, to be like, there's aspects here that are slightly interesting. Like when he talks about like them first introducing like this is the first time a platformer game did this, or
platforming frustrations out on it with a hasty tail strike and risk missing and losing the power up.
What was it?
And use it to get the next one up, positioned in such a way that you really do need the tail to get it, and feel rather pleased with myself.
Completely lost my train of thought there. Let's see, in the chat, Boogie points out one dude wrote a short book analyzing Bloodborne, but there was enough mystery plot that one could write a legit book about that. Yeah, I mean, there's nothing wrong with analysis. I've done lots of videos talking about Dark Souls. I love Dark Souls lore videos. I love A Song of Ice and Fire lore videos. The fact that they wrote a whole book, A World of Ice and Fire, which is basically just fleshing out the world, like, there's nothing wrong with that. My issue with this is that this is shit.
I should go to bed before the fortress. The fortress will take time. I should sleep. I'm not going to sleep. I'm going to do the fortress.
Who the fuck
The
talks like
fortress,
this?
The fortress, also known as Smaller Castle, is designed to evoke the Bowser castles that end at each level of Super Mario Bros. 1 with stark black backgrounds, ominous music, gray block surfaces, and pits of bubbling lava. This was the end of a level in the first game, and here it's just the middle. The game is telling us, just imagine what the real end will be. The lava now has animated bubbles instead of just being orange water texture, and the Bodobodos, living fireballs.
I mean, okay, if he was going to edit this, like, into a video series, and go...
The Fire Mario form is indicated by his pants and shirt changing into various combinations.
I'm trying to think about it, like, to talk about, like, okay, here's the first time in a Mario series we saw this. This is how we went through this. This is the impact it had on other video games. I mean, I think that could be interesting. I think talking, like, doing a video, maybe talking about, like, games that took from Dark Souls. Like, I think, obviously, Breath of the Wild took a lot from Dark Souls. There's a lot of other stuff that took a lot from Dark Souls that you can talk about. But the issue with this is just, there's no insight here. It's just him pretending his shitty playthrough is, like, interesting, which it isn't. This is like a DSP, like if DSP wrote a book, it would be... No, DSP's book would be way better.
Recurring mini boss easily dispatched with 3 stomps to the head. Later variations jump around or sprout wings, but he's a mid-world enemy for a reason. Dueling with Boom Boom, however, is not the only way out of the fortress.
Yeah, Boogie, that's a good point. For my book, I'm actually going to hire a friend of mine to proofread it for me. Then again, my book is a lot better than this. DSP's book would be funny. The whole thing would be him, like, complaining about his life, like, making shit up.
Up onto the out-of-visibility legend, you'll find a secret room that contains a warp whistle. If you've already grabbed...
We already talked about the fucking warp whistle.
You can now execute the previously mentioned warp zone trick.
My book's pretty much...
whose existence was hidden from most players.
My book's pretty much done. I'm just adding some additional content to it and just editing it. Like, so I wrote it like 4 years ago, and I was too ashamed to try to get it published because of my low self-esteem. And I'm just adding some, like, stuff that happened more recently to it.
Wins by finding and using this whistle, even though in the film the players are competing for total points and whistle use doesn't actually get you any. Oddly, he does so on the shouted advice of his friend in the crowd, who calls it the flute, though it's unclear.
Why do we need to know this? Why do we need to compare what happened in the book to... Okay, like, let me think. What would be better than this? What would be a better version of what would be a better version of this? If I did a book about Dark Souls and I talked about the characters in Dark Souls and the gods of Dark Souls, and I made comparisons to real world, like I compared Gwyn to real world kings of gods, like sky gods, like I compared him to Indra and Zeus and Thor, and then maybe I compared, like, Nito to depictions of Hades and various death gods, and you could compare it to pre-Socratic philosophy. Like, that would be interesting. Doing a book about the lore of Zelda would be interesting. Yeah, Vadi Vidya's vids. Although Vadi Vidya can be kind of obnoxious. But yeah, like, that isn't... This is awful.
Turtle-like foes that have been with the series from the beginning. As I go, it's a fun change of pace, and once upon a time I was blown away that Mario began to swim upon sliding into that pool rather than dying instantly, which is what hitting water in anything other than a designated swimming level did in previous Mario games and most other games of the era. The path forks soon afterward. From memory, I'd take the high road, leading to a surface exit and a hidden pink music.
Bob, you've never taken the high road on anything in your life.
Luckily imbued with the raccoon tail, I take it to the sky and find a one-up before popping down into the exit pipe, which spits me back down to the exit of the second, lower, path. I like that the exit pipe would have been readily visible to me had I taken this road to begin with. A clue incentive to risk going back to find it.
I'm realizing I've neglected to keep track in the prior 4 levels of my goal card. At each level's goal, you leap up and try to stop a... Okay. At the okay, so 1/6, the last regular level before you reach it. Okay, let's see here. World 1 airship. Let's just skip ahead a little bit.
But if we're not to fight the boss in the castle, where? World 1 airship. The airship is an awesome reveal. Mario runs along the ground, snags a ship's dangling anchor, and is pulled into the skyboard, the first of what serves as SMB3's...
Jenna, you calling this a cry for help is like the greatest thing of all time.
Percussion-backed theme music, alongside two cannons, Bullet Bill, a living missile and another returning classic enemy, makes his first bow. It's fun seeing what was an odd addition to the original game, a bullet in the otherwise medieval-looking Mushroom Kingdom. Here appropriately arranged as part of military munitions, Bill has found his place.
Oh my god. Okay, here appropriately arranged as part of military munitions, Bill has found his place. This is so pretentious. Like, it's pretentious, but it's I don't know. It's like he tries to combine a whole bunch of things together and fails at all of them. Like pretentious reviews, excessive description, kind of like being an ode to the common gamer.
Maneuvering across the deck of an airship, it's another auto-scrolling level. Dodging hails of bullets and cannonballs was, at the time, entirely fresh for a Mario game, and it's still a great equilibrium shift today. Bowser isn't
Equilibrium shift? This guy uses a thesaurus. Like, just
and
randomly.
Fight to you. The previous games were adventures quests. This time, it's war. I drop down the pipe at the end to do battle with the ship's captain, Larry Koopa, who immediately kills me. Shame, disgrace, disgust. I'm out of practice.
Shame, disgrace, disgust. That should just be the book. Those words repeated over and over again. That is the life of MovieBob's.
This is your incentive to clear all the levels, even though you don't have to. You don't want the ship popping itself behind an unfinished level and slowing you down. Going back in, this time I take the flower with me. It won't hurt the cannonballs or bills at all, but if I can keep it to the end, I know it will hurt Larry. It does. Larry goes down, dropping his wand. You don't have to catch the wand in midair, but I like to all the same. Mario falls from the sky, delivering the wand back to the king, who's rocking quite the neckbeard, and earning a letter of advice from Princess Peach. You're still credited as Princess Toadstool, it being 1989 and all, which warns me not to turn away from ghosts and gives me a welcome peeling. I really love
no, film studies is god awful. I took a couple film studies courses. They weren't the worst. Philosophy and film was the worst course I took on that.
Beyond the grass, despite the name, there really isn't a lot of grass on display in the now completed grassland. The name seems almost arbitrarily chosen to evoke the most peaceful, banal sort of terrain in a game where geographic features indicate the entire personality of a world. Grassy or not.
Holy thesaurus, Batman. That whole sentence was just completely like...
SMB1 and the Japanese SMB2,
they just run through a thesaurus.
Obstacles and power-ups plentifully placed to help you along. From this point on, more and more levels will take the form of either large, exploration-oriented puzzles or gauntlets of aggressive enemies and fiendishly placed hazards. The easy part is finished. Ahead lies the desert. World 2, Desertland Saturday, April 28, 2012. Did not expect to already have a 3-day gap in these entries, but life does.
Wait a minute. I wonder if that was in the original. Let me just look that up, because I'm curious if that's a typo. Like, if he put a typo that bad into his shitty book. Okay, let's see here. This is World 2. World 2 Desert Land. Yes, that is a typo in the book. That is a typo in the book. Okay, so guys, I have to take a picture of this. This is amazing. Okay, this is gonna have to be the cover of this episode. Yeah. So he does have Saturday, April 28th, 20,012.
Volvo had a pacemaker put in, and we were told she's feeling better. Either way, that in other situations in life made it necessary to back burner this project for a few days, making me much happier that I chose to power through and complete World 1 last time. It's 3:30 a.m. Tonight's libation is Pabst, don't judge me, and a shot of Jack. The desert awaits. I love the ice searing bright orange color that's supposed to indicate sand in this game. Desert Land's map is expansive, covering more than a single screen. You can't even see the castle at first, with a low-pitched percussive beat for a musical score. Incidentally, the second level of Super Mario Bros. 2, US version, was also desert-themed. I've always enjoyed the repeating visual cues games of this era used to identify different kinds of terrain. Desert equals palm trees, sand, typically realized by adding speckles or a gradient pattern to the ground, pyramids, cacti,
Oh my
etc.
god, we get it. We know what a desert
takes
is.
this another interesting step, though it actually makes its desert barren. The levels are largely flat stretches, with a lot less detail to the backgrounds than was seen in Grassland. In terms of simple, lo-fi ways to convey a sense of empty sun-bleached flatness, it's remarkably effective. Level 2-1 right off the
Okay, I'm gonna skip ahead a bit. This is unbearable. Let me try to find another part where he goes back to talking about like his life in between this. Okay, here we go. I got my 3rd star. Success. A star-shaped fireworks fills the sky and I get 5 more lives. If ever there was a sign to call it a night, that's it. This whole book is a sign like begging him to get someone to call him the person a night.
Prep work for the episode due on Monday. Done. Editing. Done. Gym workout. 1,700 calories cardio routine. Solid. Even had time to take in a movie. Safe. The umpteenth Jason Statham badass ex-cop soldier would ever saves innocent person with much punching installment. It's okay. And just for kicks, slip into another theater to watch a fresh audience react to the ending of Cabin in the Woods.
I hated Cabin in the Woods.
This is a strange level, beginning with the fact that it's represented by an animated quicksand panel on the map instead of being numbered like the others and continuing through everything else. At first, the most distinguishing feature is the cartoon-faced angry sun hovering in the upper left-hand corner of the screen. For a while, hanging there is all he does as I try my best to time the leaps over wide quicksand-filled chasms and smash rows of earthbound bricks with my raccoon tail. I forget, almost too late, that this is the first level where a tornado appears to try and mess with your flight attempts, but I remember the true, what the hell, feature of this place all too well. The angry sun eventually...
Okay, I'm gonna skip ahead to the end. This is unbelievable. Oh, okay, here we go. Here we go. This looks amazing.
A third boomerang tosser is hiding at the goal. The bastard level 2-5 the chain chomp, possibly the most enduring Mario enemy other than Boo and the Koopalings to originate in this game, makes his first appearance in spectacular fashion, lunging at you right at the start of this level. Essentially an animated ball and chain with gnashing sharp teeth that tugs at its bolted down chain like an attacked dog. He guards 2 temptingly placed question blocks. Everything about chain chomps is awesome, and their conception is one of the all-time great illustrations of how Shigeru Miyamoto's mind works. He maintains a vivid childhood memory of being attacked by an angry dog, only to be saved by the animal's leash causing it to stop short, its jaw snapping just inches from his face, and combine this memory with the classic cartoon image of the ball and chain prisoner restrained. Their movements are more fierce and animal-like than any other enemy in the franchise.
That was almost interesting.
The animation of the chain itself is fantastic for the 8-bit era, as the visual pun of the creature's appearance is instantly identifiable. Oh, and if you let it linger on screen for more than 160 seconds on the timer, it will break off the chain and come after you.
I didn't know that. That's kind of interesting,
Slippery
actually.
water at midpoint is another great...
Okay, let's see here. Stop hammer time.
Climbing it leads to clouds, coins, and a warp pipe to a room full of treasure. STOP.
Probably what happened is he tried to get somebody to edit this book, and the editor like killed themselves, and they kept killing themselves, so he just had to release it with no one looking at it.
While the second scores me my first hammer. The hammer is a map screen tool used to break the boulders that occasionally obstruct paths, but here.
Oh my god, this is so long. World 2 airship. Dry spell. Okay, let's go back and look at the let's just look at the boss battle. We're gonna try to get through this.
World 2 airship, another imperiled castle, another transformed king into a spider this time, amusingly hovering on a thread above his throne, and another trip into the sky to conquer another airship, this one colored a darker shade of green and set against a gloomier sky. The new issue of this airship is an increased amount of up and down movement in addition to the auto-scrolling.
Okay, I can't okay, let's go ahead. This is unbearable. Okay, World 3 Waterland. Okay, let's go to here.
Next comes the Water World 3, Waterland, April 30, 2012. Just had a creepy yet utterly banal pre-bedtime moment. A box of cereal I vividly remember opening and eating from a day or so ago is sealed shut. It has never been opened. I am not sure what this means or implies, either about me or the cereal. Did I hallucinate eating cereal? Of all the things to conjure, why that? And if so, why not a cereal I like more than Special K red berries? If I was going to dream of cereal, I'd have preferred it be something more potent like Fruity Pebbles.
What the hell? Okay, so I had a creepy and early banal pre-bedtime moment. A box of cereal I vividly remember opening and eating for a day or so ago is sealed completely shut. It has never been opened. This is creepypasta. This is this is like the greatest creepypasta ever. Like the box is like even his like scary experiences suck. What kind of a scary experience is a box of cereal you opened not being opened? Implies about me or the cereal. Did I hallucinate eating cereal? Why does cereal like more than Special K red berries? If I was going to dream of cereal, Fruity Pebbles or Boo Berry. Whatever time to play more Mario. So he's like playing so much Mario, he's starting to hallucinate about cereal.
Time to play some of the water levels. Tropical settings were another popular mainstay of games in this period. Usually typified by the combination of visual elements from water and jungle imagery. Colors and jazzy
that feel when the little things about his life are way better than the actual brick by brick.
And the music that evokes a breezy, laid-back beach atmosphere. The map itself is laid out with an amusing degree of logic in its design. The levels and fortresses are clustered around a coastal landmass etched with canals of water leading out to a wider ocean dotted with a few smaller islands. The islands are accessible only by a canoe you can immediately access.
It's like,
if you squint a bit, it does
where does the universe come from? Why are we here? Where do we go when we die? Why was the box of cereal sealed up?
Have frog suits if you pick the right test. The first one you're likely to encounter has only the frog suit. An interesting feature of World 3's map is the presence of drawbridges, which open and close paths, changing position as you enter and exit levels either by completion or by dying. If you time your level order correctly, or have extra lives to spare, it's a new twist on shortcut triggering. The most noteworthy aspect of this map, however, is that it's the first time.
The life of a frog.
The most noteworthy aspect of this map, however, is that it...
Okay.
The life of a frog since level 3-1 is situated out in open water.
Like, how could you write something? Like, how could you sit here and write 200 pages about you playing a Mario game and have no insight into it and not write a single thing interesting?
And the first terrain-specific item in the Mario Canyon. It changes the whole nature of how swimming levels work in the game. Traditionally, Mario sinks slowly toward the bottom when in water and must continually mash the jump button to stay afloat while moving.
Okay, I'm gonna skip ahead a bit. This is unbearable. Okay, here we go.
I barely make it to the pipe at the end intact. There's a one out just beyond there if you want to brave open water, for what it's worth, but succeed in my goal of getting to the goal still dressed like a frog. The sun is coming up outside, and ahead lies a fortress that is rather infamous in Mario lore. It will be saved for tomorrow, May 1st, 2012. Today is May Day, also known as International Workers' Day, and here in the US as Law Day, Loyalty Day, and Americanization Day at one point or another. Seems as good a moment as any to briefly consider Mario's distinctly working-class character aesthetic. Working-class hero. By now it's common knowledge that Mario's
the working-class hero, okay.
Simply called Jumpman, came about mostly from graphical necessity. He wears overalls so that you can better see the animation of his arms moving. He has a large mustache so that his nose can be better discerned. He wears a hat because hair would have been problematic to render. But by happenstance or not, it can't be ignored that these visual details, when combined with the original Donkey Kong's building construction setting and sledgehammer weaponry, added up to a character who fit into a very specific pop culture.
God, he never got over Mario not being from
presumably
Brooklyn.
from New York or some similar large eastern U.S. metropolis. Intentionally or not, I would contend that Mario's connection to this archetype and, by extension, the powerful cultural feelings it stirs in America and elsewhere is a big part of why the character has become so enduring. Granted, simply having a hero, superhero? who goes
Okay, this is actually like, okay guys, this is like the first interesting piece of analysis. This is actually kind of interesting.
Powerful image in and of itself, especially when you consider his specific career as a plumber means he typically labors mostly out of sight, often in dealing with less than pleasant but incredibly necessary mechanics of modern infrastructure. But making the Mario Brothers Italian-Americans adds yet another layer to the symbolism. They aren't just laborers, they're the children, or grandchildren, of immigrants. In an amusing sense, their unlikely second life as heroes of another world serves as an extension of that metaphor. They are now once more a pair of workers trying to make their way in yet another new world.
That is the... Okay, I take it back. That was like the cringiest thing I've ever seen. That... I'm gonna have to read that out loud. But making the Mario Brothers Italian Americans adds yet another layer to the symbolism. They aren't just laborers, they're children or grandchildren of immigrants. In an amusing sense, their unlikely second life as heroes of another world serves as an extension of that metaphor. They are now once more a pair of workers trying to make their way in yet another new world. Oh my god.
From Hell's Heart I stab at the boom boom of the irritating water fortress May 2nd, 2012. Only doing the one measly fortress yesterday bugs me. Hopefully want to squeeze in 2 levels today, at least. The road splits again after the fortress. You can go down to a pair of pipes. One drops you back at the start. The other leads to the second fortress but is blocked off at this part. Or up to 3 to 4 or 3 to 5. Both levels lead to the same next slice of the map. The trick here is entering the levels in order conducive to making that pair of bridges up top lower so you can...
I mean, the thing about MovieBob is, honestly, his movie reviews aren't bad. I actually kind of like them, to be honest. This is, like, imagine somebody put this on your gravestone. Like, this was your life's work. This fucking book. Okay, I'm just skipping past this, guys. I'm sorry. It's too much.
Impromptu meet up with my brother led to knocking some key location shooting off of the game over thinker itinerary, and some beer and burgers were shared. I'm a private heading or shit guy most of the time, but the chance to hang out with the family members I don't see every day helps center me, keep me able to see my own life from the outside where it all looks less casually apocalyptic. Bridge work depending on what order you've got the
I love that. I saw my brother. Now back to my shitty Mario. Okay, I know it's not a shitty game, but it is in this context. Okay, let's see here. This is unbearable. Okay, here we go.
May 8th, 2012. Honestly, at the start of this project it wasn't Waterland that I thought would end up taking up a big stretch of time. In terms of days, I almost don't want to think about how many day marks will be logged on the more complicated difficult areas to come level 3-9 3 to 9 begins. Deceptively, in a stand...
Okay, I'm gonna have to go back. How many days did he spend on this? It's like he spent a full month trying to play through this to beat Mario. I don't know.
So, here's what happened honestly.
Almost an entire week without coming back to the game. AKA, I couldn't beat this level, so I'm gonna lie about it.
So, here's what happened honestly. This week was going to be sparse because bigger things had to take precedence. Yesterday, my sister graduated from college, and along with taking up a whole day of required travel and preparations that pushed all my deadline projects into even higher priority than usual. But the length of the delay? That's all on me. Mistakes were made. That part about being excited to bring a frog suit onto an airship you read a moment ago? Well, in my excitement, and under the influence of a generously portioned beer Bacardi cocktail, I managed to turn off the console without properly pausing. The Wii effectively holds your place in virtual console games if you go back to the main menu before powering down, which means I'd effectively ended my game and deleted my progress. Aside from being mildly annoying, this left me with a conundrum. Since there's no leveling system in SMB3, Mario has no stats to be raised or altered over the course of play. I could easily get back to that point in relatively the same state I was and just keep going as though nothing had happened, but would that turn this whole exercise artificial and pointless? Ultimately, since the whole point is to chronicle my playthrough mistakes and all, I've decided to acknowledge it here. After all, accidentally powering off and having to start over again was a common problem in the youthful gaming circumstances I'm attempting to replicate here. World 3. Airship at first glance. Waterland's transformed king looks like another Koopa variant. Green skin, white shell, but on closer inspection he's something slightly different. His pronounced white beak and messy ring of black hair betray him as a kappa, a water spirit of Japanese mythology typically depicted with concave bowl-shaped skulls that fill with water and let them breath on land. This makes him one of the Mario series' relatively few explicit references to its own Japanese enemies produced origins, the other being the later presence of the Tanuki suit. Already, taking the frog suit with me pays off, as it's hilarious to see Frog Mario speed hopping to catch the anchor to the airship, which...
Okay, I can't okay, let's scroll ahead. Desert, distant shores, giant land. Let's see here.
Somewhere in the distance lies giant land, where physics and spatial relation you've come to rely on will be turned on its head. World 4, giant land, the actual mechanics of World 4, that it features enemies, obstacles, and portions of scenery blown up to giant size, are meant to be a surprise. Holy crap. Why is everything big? That jumps out at you upon entering level 4-1. But once you're aware of that fact, you might notice that the map screen does subtly tease the truth. You begin on a peninsula cut off from the main island, with pipes, instead of a direct walkway, your only way of traveling there. The peninsula is decorated with 3 of the palm trees you've been seeing since World 2, but the already visible trees of the main island are in fact enormous flowers. Apart from that detail, the World 4 map is deceptively conventional looking, though it does keep with the area's general theme of messing around with the sense of scale and spatial relations you were just starting to get the hang of by reversing the flow of your travel route. This is the first map where the order of levels and castles proceeds right to left instead of the other way around. Level 4-1, I first glimpsed giant land, briefly, while watching The Wizard. But at the time everything else was so much sensory overload that the curiously larger enemies didn't really register. The first time I entered level 4-1, low, mind blown. Giant land is all about giving now familiar elements of the game a tweak by making them bigger. The giant scale Goombas and Troopas have the same weaknesses and physics as their normal size cousins, but having them dwarf even Big Mario changes the whole dynamic. Even today, a plus-size Troopa shell careening toward me at high speed throws me off my rhythm, and it's still kind of delightful seeing Mario leap into the mouth of gigantic pipe, or...
Okay, here we go.
Tuesday, May 15th. It bothers me that I was only able to scratch the surface of giant land last time, owing to the extra time it took to restart for World 3. My plan is to make it up to myself for playing through as much of World 4 as I can from this point out. Rock block right next to level 4-1 on the map is a toad house that is blocked by a boulder, meaning that you can't...
I'm sure that's not the only time he's been rock blocked. Let's see here. Oh my god. How did he write this? You know, it's funny. This book actually beat me. It's so boring, so dry, so uninteresting.
No giants in the next world, where an inverted sense of scale will be replaced by an inverted sense of gravity. And the shoulders of giants. Did I really clear all but the entirety of a world in a single sitting? I did, and it's actually left me a little melancholy. I'd have gladly played through another few dozen giant-themed worlds, and I'm halfway tempted to start over just to play through these ones again. I'm always sad to leave Giant Land, because it's largely the last I'll be seeing of the scaled-up blocks and the plus-sized enemies. It's not just a fun gameplay change. The bigness of the characters allowed for the most detailed in-game images of classic enemies like Goombas and Troopas to date, and it's a simple but serious power trip to smash blocks literally 4 times your size with a single hit. But done is done. There will be no giants in the next world, where an inverted sense of scale will be replaced by an inverted sense of gravity and stability. Skyland beckons. World 5, Skyland Thursday, May 17th. Took a bit of a break after the marathon that was the previous session, hoping to settle back into a more contemplative, relaxed pace for a while, which will probably not happen, given that worlds and levels both begin to get progressively more difficult from this point on. Something isn't right. That's what World 5's map says to you, as soon as you enter. The music is upbeat, but not nearly as groovy as levels past, and it seems bizarrely empty. Less than a handful of levels, only one fortress, only one Hammer Brothers, and no castle. Instead, just a strange-looking tower, rendered in a spiral shape that recalls a ziggurat, or the biblical Tower of Babel looms ominously in the distance, while a huge...
Oh my god, did he really just reference the Tower of Babel, the thing about Mario? Whatever. Okay, let's scroll ahead. Let's go here. Okay, let me go back to his life. We're just gonna skim through. This is just, it's like, I'm sorry guys. Sorry, I'm trying to be a professional here, but it's just...
Monday, May 21st, 2020. It's only Monday, and this is already a trying week. Plus screaming on the start filming the mediocre Man in Black 3 inches in the evening, and a day of researching obscure spin-offs of the Flintstones for a different project before that. Sleep should be my first priority, but the fact that I've still got a sliver of World 5 to clear has been eating at me. World 5, Fortress 2 if nothing else. This fortress is brutal.
I feel when he thought Men in Black 3 was mediocre, it just looked like crap. I didn't see it. Let's see here. Descent, a frost is coming. Iceland, okay, here. I think it's almost done.
World 6, Iceland Wednesday, May 23rd, 2012. It might have been advisable to take more than one day off from the game at this point, for the sake of perspective if nothing else. But I know myself too well. Iceland is, to put it mildly, not my favorite portion of this game. If I don't dive right back in and power through it, I run the risk of half-assing or even losing track of this project. I've come just a bit too far to let that happen. Suck it up. Settle in, chug your beer. It's time to face at least the first few legs of this long, hard slog through the snow. As I said before, there is nothing that makes the hair stand up on the necks of gamers who queue up an SMB30 like the prospect of an ice level. 3D rendering had not yet manifested as an element of game design. As such, there was little opportunity for designers to play around with the physics of terrain response, since you couldn't yet set a character's model to react to traversing three-dimensional textures. What you could do, however, was change up what physics variables were available, speed, stopping, etc., to create the illusion of greater or lesser friction. In simpler terms, you could make the ground slippery. Ice-snow-based levels provided an opportunity to make wide use of this trick, frequently resulting in what were often the most challenging, frustrating areas of any given game. Perhaps being aware of this likely response from players, World 6's map screen doubles down on the ominous. Even if the vast expanse of piercing white terrain and gleaming blue glaciers doesn't worry you, the eerie ambient music, it vaguely recalls the Twilight Zone theme, will. Whereas the previous World's aesthetic...
I admit I get Super Mario World and Super Mario Brothers 3 mixed up
series of levels.
a lot.
The map itself, you will ultimately discover, is massive. Friday, May 25th, 2012. It's late, or early, rather, and I'm sleepy as hell. This has been a trying week, and because of the Memorial Day holiday, I've had to get in a bunch of stuff for Monday way ahead of deadline. That's good for business, of course, though I just know it's going to lead me into bouts of, oh no, I have no work, what do I do with myself? Panic attacks. The answer should be play more of the game, dummy. But I somehow bet that won't happen. The space between recording, transcribing, and actually writing up, fleshing out the playthrough has started to widen a bit, so I may step back for a day or two to catch myself up. For tonight, though, a few more levels of Iceland. At least level 6-6. I pull a fire flower from the inventory before I go in. It's Iceland, after all. 6-6 begins much the same as 6-5, beginning with a pipe that leads into another huge underground cavern. Fortunately, this one isn't nearly as punishing, or at least I don't remember it being so. 2 paths to take, one up, one down. I opt for down first, grabbing a starman and killing a piranha plant, but curiosity gets the better of me and I double back to try the high road. First observation up top. Spike, the spike ball spitting turtle, makes his return appearance. Lucky for me, he's vulnerable to fireballs. The little block-length water pools up here have a cheap jumping between them, the first time this behavior is observed of this enemy. High road leads to a dead end, but at least there's...
And yes, I did buy this. It was only like $6, so...
Tuesday, May 28th, 2012. Technically, it's more like bedtime Monday night for me, but the facts are the facts. It's about 3 a.m. or so Tuesday morning, and I'm winding down after a somewhat draining Memorial Day. My grandmother is back at home after another worrying trip to the hospital. Now under more or less constant oversight by family and nurses. I woke up to a phone message from my mother informing me that she appeared to be in a fading state, and that people were advised to stop by and say, well, you get the idea. I went over, but couldn't bring myself to stay long. She was with her...
So Movie Bob abandons his mother who's in the hospital to go play more Mario 3. Kind of like when DSP would go to the wedding to play Fallout 4.
I said my piece and left in as good a state as I could manage, at least until I got to my car. I needed to get outside the grid of my familiar areas, and I needed to happy up, or at least clear my head. After that, and took the first course of action that entered my mind in that regard. My brother had raved recently about a retro-style video arcade, the Pinball Wizard, that had opened up shop just over the state line in New Hampshire, a half-hour drive up into the country. All things considered, it was a better option than drinking in the early afternoon.
I like how he seems like he's an alcoholic too. Then again, if I was Movie Bob, I'd probably be an alcoholic too.
Surprising rarities. Only time I'd ever seen a barely localized Sailor Moon BM up in the wild, and I'm always overjoyed to find a Beast Buster still standing. In terms of head clearing, the not overlong detour did the trick, and on arriving home I learned that the earlier worries were a touch premature. Her condition had improved greatly later on in the day. Small relief, but relief nonetheless. Still, since playing classic games as a psychological bomb has become a theme of the day, may as well polish off some more of World 6 before I officially call it a day.
Okay, let's see here. Is this over? Okay, World 7 pipe maze. How many worlds are there?
Saturday, June 1st, 2012 confession. Despite my oft-stated ticking clock scenario with this Project Ray, one more playthrough in my childhood home before I move out. My actual apartment hunting has been moving in fits and starts, at best. I've only recently begun to make any real headway toward decent, within my budget, arrangements. Oh, I've been looking at places, lots of places in fact. But I just haven't found the proper space yet. I obviously don't expect to find a palace, but I'm also not looking to move into somewhere sketchy. Living in pseudo-squalor for the experience is for 20-year-olds who just moved to New York, not 30-year-olds belatedly moving from one part of Massachusetts to a different part of Massachusetts. The big breakthrough recently has been raising the ceiling on my price range, which seems to have opened up spots where the dollar amount rent is higher than I've been looking at, but some of the amenities, electricity, for example, are included, which might actually work out better. I have a prospect in the works now, a lead on an in-law apartment in the lower level of a suburb in nearby Revere. Sounds promising. We'll see, as though setting us up for the wave of new nests to come in Bowser's domain. The next to last world is decidedly different from what we've experienced before. Starting with the detail that this is the only world, in the NES version, at least, to be called something other than land, whereas the other worlds are themed around traditional geographic features, or, in the case of Skyland...
Oh my god, it's such an autistic thing to notice.
Featuring a specific type of enemy, pipes, and all manner of piranha plants. By that same token, it's also the first instance of a Mario game building a world theme around a mechanism characteristic that only occurs in the Mario franchise. The slow creep of self-reference continues.
Slow creep of self-reference continues.
It's a series of islands, mostly unconnected, traversable only via pipes. The local decorative fauna are all piranha plants. Instead, leafy carnivores have also replaced the wandering Hammer brothers as map hazards, two of them fixed in place as though growing there rather than stalking the map. The color scheme, a dark green and brown terrain against the darker than usual blue water, almost gives a sense of passing light. It's dusk now, and beyond lies dark times. The music is also refreshingly different and excellent. A slow, low beat that recalls a dark, smoky jazz club during off hours. Suspiciously laid back would be an accurate description, particularly given the amount of punishment the levels are about to mete out. Level 7-1 if nothing else. I am thrilled to be back on relatively stable, non-ice covered ground. Green grass, autumn-hued ground, a cream-colored sky. It's good to be back to normal, and I...
Okay, let's skip ahead. I think we're getting there. Okay, let's look at some more of his life.
Mickey is my prize this time. As good a moment as any to call it a night. Monday, May 4th, 2012 today. Or, rather, yesterday, though it was only a few hours ago, was a good day. Dinner at Fancy, for our area, restaurant with the family officially celebrating my kid sister's college graduation. Classic New England fare, steaks, big salads, chowder, family-sized plate of mussels, etc. Went our separate ways after that, but as my brother and his girlfriend were making ready to head back to their apartment, it occurred to the three of us that we didn't have anything to do between us. A light bulb went off in my head, and I asked my brother if he'd made note that the Simpsons arcade game had been ported Xbox Live. He had not, but his widening eyes told me we'd found our thing to do for the evening. Side-scrolling multiplayer fighting games.
Wait a minute, whoa. Movie Bob is spending time with another human being?
For almost any franchise you could dream up, or, more profitably, license. Players, usually between 1 and 4, sometimes more.
Sergio Gonzalez, that is the quote of the night. I mean, I feel like this might as well be Caesar's Gallic Wars. This is the modern day Caesar's Gallic Wars.
Developed by a Japanese team who weren't given the chance to become intimately familiar with the source material. It played like a fever dream version of the then groundbreaking animated sitcom. Springfield is crawling with hired goons ghosts, and even zombies. Mr. Smithers is stealing diamonds for some reason, and Mr. Burns attacks with a mecha suit at the end. In any case, the game was a staple of me and my brother's arcade-frequenting youth. We were never able to muster the proper stamina, amount of quarters, to actually beat the damn thing, though, so powering through it with XBLA's Unlimited continues is a special thrill. All in all, a solid evening of retro gaming. Now to be followed by...
Okay, let's see here. I think we're almost done. Okay, here we go.
Wednesday, June 6th, finally got a look at my first truly solid apartment prospect and I instantly liked it. Good location, convenient for work, full kitchen, full bed, bathroom.
Work?
Nice
this
little
guy
lounge
doesn't
I can
work. He
easily turn
makes
into a TV gaming area.
crappy
Price
movie
extraordinarily
reviews.
well given all that, so I put in a bid. We'll see if it pays off. Either way, to finish this project before I move out clock is now actively ticking again. Back to work. Now level 7 to 9.
Back to work. I love how this is his definition of work. Is writing this shitty book. Okay, let's see here. Ludwig von Koopa. Okay.
World 8, Dark Land Friday, June 15th, 2012. The past couple of weeks have been rough, equal parts trying and semi-exhilarating. It's looking very much like I'm going to come out on top regarding that apartment, which is extremely good news. On the other hand, things seem to be deteriorating for Vovo, my grandmother. She's been back in and out of doctor's care, and now requires a rotating schedule of family members to keep an eye on her overnights. The failing health has taken most of her hearing. The inevitable, and whatever comes with it, is likely not far off. To be honest, I'll be happy for her to go to her rest. She'd always been a fiercely self-reliant person, and this current state must be as frustrating for her as it is for us. Mainly, I'm worried about what becomes of my various relatives in the wake of her
Then my
father,
bitchy mother's
particular,
gonna die so I can
doesn't
play
handle
more
these things
Mario
well at all.
games.
Meanwhile, my
She was
mother,
taking up
being
my
the nurse in the
time.
family and also the self-appointed manager of family history and memorabilia, will likely be conscripted as part of the arrangement making. It will be taxing. I know this, and it dawns on me now that, though it wasn't my intent, if this apartment deal actually goes through, I will be moving on at the precise moment when a family should be pulling closer together. Nothing I can do about that, but it feels unfortunately fitting that fate would make a callous-seeming man of me in this moment. As ever, SMB3 is there for me in this time, but not for much longer. I've reached the point of no return. The last world. The final conflict. The end of the game.
The end of my life.
Do
Do you think like MovieBob has like a gun set off, and it's like soon as he beats Bowser, like it fires?
And a monster were difficult to pull off in 8-bit graphics. Some games managed it thematically. Castlevania.
Let's see here. I hate the Western death pageantry, the whole funeral scene. Oh, okay, here we go. Okay, here's him whining about his dead mother.
Saturday, June 16, 2012. This is not a good day. Tonight, sometime after midnight, Evangeline Chipman, my grandmother, passed away after her long illness. This isn't a place to dwell on the details or burden you with my own sadness, but suffice it to say that despite the impression the rest of this book may have given, I do have many happy childhood memories that don't involve video games, and many of them were spent with her. I will miss her terribly, and the next several days, hell, the next year, will likely be very trying for the whole family. All I'm sure of now is that for the first time since I started this project, maybe for the first time ever, I just don't feel much like playing Super Mario Bros. 3. Sunday, June 17th, 2012.
Oh, that's such a lie,
As you can
of
probably
course.
imagine, more than a little downbeat here. The funeral won't be until the end of the week, with the wake and various other unpleasant duties.
No, he doesn't have any memories
I
that
hate
don't
the
involve
Western
video
death pageantry,
games.
the whole funeral scene. I understand and respect that the whole production, the flowers, the speeches, the organized grief, the services, the procession, etc., is comforting to some people, most people, it seems. And I absolutely get how it restores a sense of structure for people who are left adrift after a loved one's passing, but it's all just so much anxiety and crowd panic to me. I know that people have the best possible intentions when they want to comfort me, or anyone else, in such circumstances, but I only get over, or accept loss through the passage of time. It's just how I'm wired, and conversely I'm really of no good emotional help to anyone else in such times either.
That's
I
because
just
you
want to
can't
deal
connect
it,
with
get
another
through it,
human
breathe
being
in
at
my
all.
own way, and get back to living, complicating things. The morning before Vovo passed, I found myself finally signing the deal to move into my new apartment on the 1st of July. Part of which involves getting right back on the horse with this book. Idle Hands, the second map screen of Dark Land, adds dancing skulls to the area's spooky decor and adds to the...
Yeah, I wonder if Mario, I wonder if he has like a shrine to Mario and he like worships him or something like that. I don't know.
Thursday, June 21st, 2012, the funeral was early this morning. Things were difficult, but the service was beautiful and everyone kept their composure as best they were able. As mentioned earlier, I'm a complete and utter social wreck in these situations.
In all
I couldn't make
situations.
it all the way through the wake yesterday, even, so I was in no psychological state to attend the post-burial let's all eat potluck and somberly socialize business afterwards. I justify my emotional cowardice by telling myself that my main concern is not offending, disturbing anyone else with my angst, which is true, just not as true as I'd like it to be. In any case, fate provided a solution. On top of everything else, the air conditioner in our home, which is ancient enough to have a beige housing and faux wood paneled faceplate, but which Dad has convinced himself is only a few years old and easily fixable, finally gave up the ghost after years of erratic functionality. So, while the rest of the family was off to share grief in the manner of psychologically healthy human beings, I was off to buy, set up and install a new AC. If nothing else, when we were all, inevitably, still sad later on, at least we weren't also miserably hot and sweaty. Life will go on. In any case, it's only now starting to dawn on me, with the weight of today now starting to recede, that my impending move is also fast approaching. Given that so much of this SMB3 project has been about...
I love how, like,
suddenly
his
realized
mother
just how
died,
really
he's
wrong
moving
it is for me to
houses,
finish this playthrough somewhere other than
but-
this house, my childhood home, where all the others that led up to it were played. There can be no equivocating now. No, well, it'll be fine if the last...
Wait a minute, he was doing this all in his home? He's like 35 years old. He's playing Mario games in his home and writing this shitty book.
Using another grate.
Okay, and working at Blockbuster, of course. Let's see here. Okay, let's see here.
The king of the Koopas Super Mario Bros. 3's Bowser is probably the most impressive graphical achievement in the entire game, and remains one of the best-looking sprites, boss or otherwise, of the 8-bit era. In the pre-3D era, there were only two ways of making a sprite seems alive through animation: either build it out of multiple separate static sprites, body, appendages, etc., or actually create multiple separate full sprites with subtle changes between them in the manner of traditional hand-drawn animation. That second method, the more difficult and data-consuming one, is employed here. For the first time, Bowser appears in a Mario game looking like he does in the menu and other production artwork. The hair, the horns, a remnant of Shigeru Miyamoto, originally basing him on a version of the Ox King from Journey into the West. The shell, the spiked bracelets, all the visual signifiers of his various character influences, like his children, a mixture of a Kappa, and Oni, and late 80s punk metal fashion, all finally visible in the game itself. Beyond that, his range of animation is striking given the era and technical limitations of the NES. He has a 3/4 turn image for when he changes direction. His head is animated to look back and forth. His head jerks backwards before he spits fire, and he even has a separate jumping animation rather than simply being propelled upwards. That jump, incidentally, is actually his primary attack here and also the key to his destruction. When he lands on the brick bridge, aiming for Mario, always, a bit of it will shatter. 3 hits in the same spot and he'll fall through the bottom into his doom. At least, that's the idea. I don't even get to see him break one measly brick this time.
So this game was like the original Dark Souls? He keeps the final battle. Okay.
Landing safely, it's time to enter the door and fight Bowser once again. The final battle, it really is kind of brilliant how this particular Bowser battle simultaneously makes him the most difficult boss in the game and reinforces him as a genuine threat, but also sets up a battle that neatly cements everything you need to know about the conflict between the two characters having it out on screen. Bowser seems invincible. You can't jump on him and you can't touch him. Mario may be some kind of superhuman force against all the other enemies in the game, but here against Bowser he's a mouse going up against a Sherman tank. But, invincible or not, Bowser isn't smart. He's a brute, the leader of his people solely by Dana being the biggest and most powerful among them, and he fights like one. There's no strategy here. He simply comes after you with everything he's got, literally throwing his weight around, utterly blind to the damage he might do to himself in the process. The fight, for the player and for Mario, is all about outsmarting Bowser. Using the precision jumping and dodging techniques honed over 8 worlds worth of combat to effectively fool him into beating himself. With that in mind, I dive out of the way of the Koopa King's first lunge. He lands dead center on the bridge, one layer of bricks smashed away. I think back to the summer afternoon, possibly in 1990, when I played this part for the first time. I remember an electric jolt crackling through my brain when I saw what Bowser's impact did to the bridge.
This is the apotheosis of Bob's existence. This is the greatest thing that he ever achieved and ever will achieve in his life.
The best place
Finishing
to go is the ledge above the door.
Mario
Make to
3.
jump wide and give myself room to get back to the bridge. Impact number 2 is dead center again, but this time I'm not fast enough. A hit is taken, and I'm small Mario again. This is as real as it gets, and that nice comfy store of extra lives down below gives
This
me
is
no
as
real
real
clue
as
as
it
I dodge
gets.
and loop back around again. I want to beat him here, now. I drop down into the impact crater. Bowser,
Wow.
having regained his composure up above, leaps into the air poised to rain his bulk down on top of me. He drops. I jump for it down. Goes. Bowser, in a truly excellent final touch, his fall is scored to comedic music and ends with a thump that shakes the room and bounces Mario off his feet, Wile E. Coyote style. Victory! The locked door vanishes in a puff of smoke, and the door flashes with neon light. Inside, in a room that has decor curiously close to that of the mushroom houses, is Princess Peach, at last. In an interesting bit of visual continuity, her sprite is basically the same one from Super Mario Bros. 2 inches with an added crying pose. Thank you, but our princess is in another castle, just kidding. Ha ha ha. Bye-bye. It's a simple, and kind of dopey, joke, bringing back the in another castle bit that greeted you at every castle but the final one in the original SMB. Can't even say I found it particularly funny as a kid, even by the standards of what passed for humor in games of the day. But from the vantage point of history, this marks a very important moment in the evolution of the Mario franchise, the precise point at which self-awareness entered the franchise. This is the first time a Mario
Is that
game
like
took
the
a shot at
precise
itself,
moment
and
where
hence
like
with a
the
certain
AI
amount of
became
regard for the formula. And
self-aware?
Argent universe has been standard issue for the series. In a nice touch, the big red curtain comes down on a scene once more, then immediately zips back up as the game takes a bow over a credit roll of flashbacks to the worlds conquered, enemies beaten, and power-ups used throughout your quest. But one more especially awesome bonus remains. If you press start once the end comes up, the game cycles back to the introductory screen ready for another go-around, but with one key difference. Your surplus items menu is now fully stocked with P-Wings. This is, without a doubt, a great feature. Hey, man. Good job beating the game. Now, here's a giant bag of ultimate power so you can go explore all the parts you might have skipped or found too difficult the first time. An invitation to play again and the opportunity to really cut loose while doing so. It's the perfect ending to the perfect game. The last
Perfect game.
What else can I say about Super Mario Bros. 3 inches that I haven't already said ad nauseum? Even today, after all these years,
I'm a little bit like this about Ocarina of Time / Majora's Mask, but
even this time
no,
through,
not at
playing
all.
it for the umpteenth time and for work rather than only for pleasure. It all still hits as fresh as ever. The joyful exhilaration of taking off into the sky as Raccoon Mario, the surreal adorableness of Tanuki and Frog Mario, some bleached stretches of desert land, the awe-inspiring ascent onto that first airship, the pure cartoon fun of Karaibo's Chu at this moment. In this game, everything went right all at once. Video games have, to be certain, come a long way
This
since
was
then.
like the
The
only
worlds have
like
become
good
older,
moment
the
of
graphics have
MovieBob's
become more
life.
cinematic,
Everything
more
else was
And while
downhill
I've
from
enjoyed
there.
many games of the modern era.
Okay, and we're finally at the epilogue, ladies and gentlemen. We're almost
Until
done.
the first of 2012, I officially moved out of the home I'd lived in for 31 years.
Wow,
of my life.
31
The
years.
home where I'd taken my first steps. The home where I'd said my first words. The home where I'd fired up my first NES, played through countless games, and developed a love of gaming that now culminates in this book. The home where I played Super Mario Bros. 3 inches for the first time and where I just finished playing through it one more time. It's a somewhat sad occasion, however long in coming, though blunted, of course, by the excitement of the move. It's a good little place, better than I could have reasonably expected to afford, honestly, but my initial feeling is that it will take a while for me to make it feel like home. As it turned out, it only took 10 days. On July 11th, while digging through the far back reaches of an old closet while looting my parents' house, I'm trying very hard to think of it in those terms and not as home anymore. For usable household wares, I discovered an aged box containing Wonder of Wonders, an NES, my NES, my original, real, authentic NES. I suddenly hated myself for letting it languish there. It should have stayed hooked up forever, but this was an oversight I would correct.
The way
Unboxes
he
full of
talks
more
about
treasures,
this
the
is
SNES, the Nintendo 64,
is just-
a Dreamcast, the controllers and hookups for all of them, and, yes, my original copy of Super Mario Bros. 3. After some refurbishing with rubbing alcohol and careful dusting, I hooked them up to my new TV and powered them up. After a few tense moments and some good old-fashioned cartridge wiggling, it worked. The machine still works. The game, in every sense of the word, still works. I am, at last, home.
So that was his like Jungian self-fulfillment where he merges with his shadow. Like at the end of some books, the character gains enlightenment. In the end of some books, the guy there's the ending to Shawshank Redemption. There's the ending to Inception. There's the ending to I don't know, the Return of the Jedi. And then we have MovieBob finding his old NES and turning it on. Wow. That is like the apotheosis of his life. Not having children, not succeeding in his life, not getting married, not anything. It's just him rambling on about how he found his old NES, and that the only thing that ever made him happy in life was was Super Mario Brothers 3. So I don't really know what to say about it. I think when somebody referred to this as a desperate cry for help / a suicide note, that was probably the best description possible of this book. So I gotta say, this was awful. If people want me to do Elliot Rodgers by Twisted World, I will do that. But this was unbearable. I'm glad I skipped most of the actual content, because yeah, I'm sorry if my commentary is a little lacking. There just wasn't a ton to say. It was just really boring. But this was MovieBob's magnum opus. This is all of his wisdom and all of the stuff that he ever achieved in his life. The greatest game ever made, the greatest story ever told, and the greatest story never told. I will put it up, a video with an introduction. So yeah, I'll talk to you guys later. Have a good evening.